There is a powerful force hiding underground where tectonic plates meet, and one forces another under it. This happens in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Strain builds over centuries. The tension is unbearable until the megathrust awakens. The Earth shakes with a magnitude that can exceed 9 points, more powerful than any other earthquake. When the seafloor suddenly gets pushed up fast, it sends a huge ripple across the water, and a tsunami of huge force is out. These waves are called teletsunamis, and they cross entire ocean basins, ready to take over coastlines thousands of miles away. The thrust fault stretches over 600 miles. The Earth is not just shaking, it feels like it's tearing apart. This is the power of a megathrust earthquake. Those caught in its path will have to fight for their lives. Japanese authorities recently had to issue their first ever Megaquake advisory. It happened because of a strong tremor on the edge of the Nankai Trough ocean floor zone. In the end, most of the warnings were lifted, and there wasn't much damage from the 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Parts of southwestern Japan started to shake, and the superfast trains in Japan slowed down to stay safe, which made travel slower for everyone. But everyone is staying alert as they know about the risk of a megathrust earthquake that could happen within the next few decades in the Nankai Trough. The tectonic plate under the Philippine Sea is slowly sliding underneath the land where Japan is, moving just a few inches every year. The last big earthquakes from this area happened in 1944 and 1946, both with a magnitude of 8.1. These quakes have caused a lot of destruction in the country. The next megathrust earthquake in the region, if it does happen, could be between a magnitude 8 and 9. Scientists still can't agree on how likely this mega earthquake is to happen, but it could be up to 80% certainty. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and it stretches from northern California to northern Vancouver Island in Canada. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happens every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and it worries scientists. They think this might be because the area is locked, meaning the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. Eventually, the part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. The ground on some inland hills could turn into something like quicksand. This would cause the hillsides to slide and crumble, taking down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse, including about 100 hospitals and 2,000 schools. People in Washington state might have to take care of themselves without help for 2 weeks, finding food, water, and shelter on their own. Scientists are studying slow slip events, where the tectonic plates move very slowly over weeks or months, releasing some energy but not enough to stop a big one. Every time the magnitude of an earthquake goes up by just one number, the energy it releases is 40 times bigger. So we'd need about 1 million small earthquakes every day for 500 years straight to release the same energy as one huge magnitude 9 earthquake. But these small earthquakes might be clues that a bigger earthquake is coming. To better monitor the Cascadia Fault, experts are mapping the fault more accurately and adding better monitoring tools offshore. Scientists receive over $10 million to install seismic sensors and seafloor pressure gauges on a fiber optic cable off the coast of Oregon. The goal is to be ready to warn people and potentially save lives when a big earthquake strikes. A sharp megathrust earthquake happened in this part of the world in 1964. It went down in history as the Great Alaska Earthquake and had a magnitude of 9.2. It lasted for more than 4 minutes, making it the most powerful earthquake in the history of the U.S. and North America. The ground shook so hard that it caused huge cracks and landslides. In Anchorage, many houses, buildings, and roads were destroyed because they weren't built to handle such a big earthquake. In some places, the land was permanently changed. For example, the coastline near Kodiak and Hinchinbrook Island was lifted by 30 feet. In other areas, like Gurwood and Portage, the ground sank by 8 feet. They had to rebuild roads higher so they wouldn't be flooded by the tide. A huge 27-foot tsunami wiped out the entire village of Chiniga. Many coastal towns were heavily damaged, not just by the earthquake, but also by tsunamis and the fires that followed. After the main earthquake, there were thousands of smaller aftershocks for months. A moderate earthquake of magnitude 4.4 shook Los Angeles in August 2024. Once it was over, the LA Fire Department checked around the city and didn't find any major damage or anyone hurt. In the nearby city of Pasadena, which is close to the earthquake's epicenter, a water pipe burst inside City Hall and everyone had to leave the building. Thankfully, there was no danger of a tsunami. The best we can do to avoid panic in such situations is to be prepared. Japan is one of the places on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. Around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. The 1950 law set a rule that buildings should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is to not collapse and save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. Another technique is placing special pads made from materials like rubber at the base of a building. Some buildings are even built on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot, moving up to 5 feet. To stop it from getting damaged, engineers can add something called dampers every second floor all the way to the top. These dampers are like giant bicycle pumps, but instead of air, they're filled with liquid. When the building shakes, the dampers push against the liquid inside them. Even though the liquid doesn't squish very much, it can still absorb some of the shaking. When they're building tall skyscrapers, engineers try to make the structure as simple and balanced as possible. This means having each floor the same height and placing the support columns evenly. But sometimes, architects who design skyscrapers don't want to make these compromises because they have creative ideas for how the building should look. Then they have to find compromise solutions. For example, Tokyo's Skytree Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, is designed in a futuristic style but also includes special features to protect it from earthquakes. It has a central pillar, like in traditional Japanese pagodas, and seismic dampers that help absorb the energy from an earthquake, keeping the building safe. So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas Fault Line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas Fault Line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tajon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something that can cause more damage than the big one. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
A magnitude 15 earthquake has the potential to completely destroy our planet and evaporate all the water in a matter of seconds, leaving Earth uninhabitable. Over 500,000 earthquakes happen annually, but none have a magnitude of 15. 90% of quakes occur in the terrifying Ring of Fire zone located around the Pacific Ocean. The ground there is like jello. It shakes almost constantly. The most powerful earthquake to have ever struck Earth had a magnitude of 9.5. That much power can lengthen or shorten the day. But there's probably an earthquake in the confines of your own home now caused by a speck of dust landing on a table. But it has a power of negative 15 magnitudes. Earthquakes happen when tectonic plates move. They're like Lego pieces that are not properly secured, and when they move up, down, or hit one another, the ground also moves, triggering earthquakes. This tectonic energy acts like a battery. It stores energy for a long time, up to 500 years. When this stored energy is released in a sudden burst, the consequences are horrifying. Even the strongest structures submit to this relentless force that leaves a trail of destruction in its path. In some instances, earthquakes can even trigger tsunamis, amplifying the chaos. Such a crazy amount of power can split the ground open and cause severe damage. The strength of an earthquake is measured by the Richter scale, but now it's being replaced by the moment magnitude scale. When there's an earthquake, we hear about how strong it is. It's usually from 1 to 10. Luckily, we haven't had a Richter scale earthquake yet. The most powerful earthquake to have ever happened in modern history occurred in Chile in the 60s. It was around 9.5 on the Richter scale, and it altered Earth's rotation and messed up the length of the day by around 2 milliseconds. It also triggered a massive tsunami and affected a vast area of 155,000 square miles. The Richter scale doesn't actually have a limit. Still, anything above 25 doesn't need measuring, because if that ever happened, we would simply turn into dust, and nobody would care to measure this disaster. As we said, the strongest earthquake had a magnitude of 9.5. If this magnitude had been just 0.5 stronger, it would have created a ruptured line 2,174 miles long. That is almost 7 times the size of Wyoming. A magnitude 11 earthquake would create a crack halfway around the world. Massive tsunamis would hit coastal areas, destroying everything, and Earth would get into a massive environmental crisis. If you love hiking, you would have new mountains to explore, created by the terrifying earthquake. Even the temperature would increase because of volcanic eruptions and the resulting greenhouse gases. It would turn our planet into a hot oven. The safest places would be far away from any buildings, seas, oceans, and mountains where there would be a low chance of a landslide. Countries unprepared for earthquakes would be totally destroyed, and cities would turn into piles of rubble and dust. Going up on the Richter scale would only make things worse. But don't worry, an earthquake of that power is impossible. Earth's crust doesn't have enough energy to produce such earthquakes. But there is something that has much more power and can produce mega earthquakes. Asteroids are powerful enough to destroy our planet, as we all know from the dinosaur era. That asteroid was around 6 miles long and it caused massive damage to the planet. It triggered earthquakes that shook the ground constantly for months. These terrifying quakes were about 50,000 times stronger than the Chile earthquake. They also triggered a tsunami that was 30,000 times more powerful than the Indian Ocean tsunami. And the latter was one of the most devastating tsunamis to have ever struck Earth. The earthquakes caused by the asteroid had a magnitude of 11, making it the most powerful and scariest natural disaster ever. And let's hope it stays that way. The Indian Ocean tsunami affected only certain areas of the world. Meanwhile, the asteroid tsunami affected every part of the world and had 33-foot-tall waves. Even if you had traveled to the most remote place on Earth, you wouldn't have been able to hide from this Grim Reaper. A 15-magnitude earthquake wouldn't be 15% stronger than the Chile earthquake. The scale doesn't work like that. It would be around 100 million times more powerful than a 9.5 magnitude quake. It could make all the water on Earth evaporate, leaving us devastated and without any H2O to survive. All ecosystems would collapse, all food chains would be broken, and only some super strong bacteria would probably survive the impossible. That is only a fraction of the frightening things that could happen. The ocean is like the AC for our planet. Without it, Earth would be super hot. The ocean also serves as a shield from the sun's powerful rays. It acts as a heat absorber and cools Earth. Scientists think that the most dangerous thing would be the inability of Earth's crust to survive the violent shakes of the 15-magnitude earthquake. If our planet miraculously survived and didn't turn into dust, there would be massive openings in its crust. The ground would become gelatinous. It would randomly move up, down, left, and right, and no building would survive that. Our civilization would be brought back to the Stonehenge era. Tectonic movements like this are devastating. A similar thing happened in Japan when tectonic plates moved 165 feet from each other and then snapped back together, creating a 9-magnitude earthquake. No place on Earth is immune to this bone-chilling natural phenomenon. Still, certain places have higher chances of being destroyed than others, like the Ring of Fire, where 90% of earthquakes happen. This is a place where earthquakes are almost everyday occurrences. The Ring of Fire is located in the Pacific Ocean. It forms a ring around the continents that surround the Pacific. There, several tectonic plates meet, creating highly unstable ground. To make the problem much more terrifying, 75% of active volcanoes are located in this area. 90% of dormant volcanoes are also there, making this place extremely dangerous. Scientists carefully study this region to find a way to predict when the next earthquake might strike. The Ring of Fire is not the only place at risk of earthquakes. In California, along the San Andreas fault line, 2 tectonic plates have been storing power for more than 200 years. The San Andreas Fault is 715 miles long and has the potential for a massive earthquake. This region has its fear of violent earthquakes like the one that happened in San Francisco in 1906. It had a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale. Scientists' predictions are terrifying. They say that the chance of a 6.7 magnitude earthquake is very high in the area. If all hell starts to break loose, you should know how to survive. Avoid anything that might fall on you, like windows, closets, or unstable ceilings. The official phrase from emergency experts is drop, cover, and hold on. Stay low to the ground. Hide under something stable like a table, and remain there until the shaking stops. Make sure to stay in your shelter for another minute or two, just in case there are aftershocks or loose debris. Use your nose and smell for gas. If you do smell it, don't turn the lights on or do anything that might ignite it. Stay strong and be safe.
An earthquake in Indonesia began in 1829 and lasted a mighty 32 years. It reached its climax in 1861 and hit a magnitude of around 8.5. It was caused by the tectonic plates below the island slowly clashing against each other. Researchers discovered that the quake had been building for some time after analyzing the coral in the area. They found it was being periodically exposed to the open air. That was caused by the gradual earthquake moving the land up and down. Scientists call these decades-long silent earthquakes slow slip events. A single lightning bolt can warm the air to around 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat makes the air expand quickly, creating a shock wave or boom, which we know to be thunder. There are close to 3 trillion trees on Earth. That translates to roughly around 422 trees for every person. Before humans, the number was nearer to 6 trillion. Almost 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, which on average is around 2.5 miles deep. 97% of Earth's volcanoes lie underwater, as well as the mid-ocean ridge, a massive mountain range that is over 40,000 miles long. Humans have mined around 190,000 tons of gold from the planet. Experts predict there is around 20% still left to be mined, but this figure is constantly changing. The world's largest active volcano is in Hawaii. Called Mauna Loa, it's over 2.5 miles above sea level. Given that most of it is underwater, the volcano's summit is a staggering 11 miles from its base. That's the same length as over 160 football fields. The highest ever recorded temperature on Earth was a sweltering 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It was recorded in El Azizia, or modern-day Libya, on September 13, 1922. The lowest temperature was a chilling minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Russia's Vostok station in 1983. Earth is the 5th largest planet in the solar system, behind Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. It has a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles, and it would take the average person around 8,300 hours to walk around the face of the Earth. The separation between Earth's land masses would make such a trek almost impossible, though. It takes 365.25 days for the Earth to orbit the Sun. Because our calendar years only have 365 days, we add an extra leap day every 4 years to make up for the difference. Russia is the largest country on the planet, with a total area of about 6.5 million square miles. It encompasses more than 1/8 of the Earth's inhabited land area, but still has a relatively small population given its size. Earth is the only planet with one moon. Mercury and Venus have no moons, while every other planet has 2 or more. Earth is over 4 billion years old. Scientists calculate this by looking at the planet's oldest rocks, as well as meteorites that have crash-landed. They used meteorites as they were formed at the same time as Earth, when the solar system was forming. The ground we walk on is basically recycled. The planet's rock cycle turns igneous rocks to sedimentary ones, then transforms those into metamorphic rocks, and back again. Like Earth, our moon also experiences earthquakes. They're less common and intense than the ones we have, and are caused by tidal stresses. A tidal stress is basically the relationship between the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth and that of the Earth on the moon. Despite being the 5th largest continent, Antarctica holds 70% of the planet's fresh water and about 90% of its ice. Bangkok is the most visited city in the world, boasting 23 million visitors in 2019 alone. Paris, London, Dubai, and Singapore make up the other cities in the top 5. The lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere is called the troposphere and is the reason we have weather. Sunlight heats the planet's surface, which causes warm air to rise up to the troposphere. This air then expands and cools as the air pressure decreases and sinks down, where it is then warmed by the Earth again. Coral reefs are the largest living structures on the planet, with some even being visible from space. Coral reefs hold the most species per area of any of Earth's ecosystems, even more than rainforests. Earth got its name around 1,000 years ago, and it comes from the German word meaning the ground, but there's no evidence to show who actually named it. Of all the planets, Earth is also the only one which is not named after a Greek or Roman deity. The deepest point of the ocean is the Mariana Trench. It's a whopping 7 miles below sea level. Coastlines cover about 20% of U.S. land, but are home to more than 50% of the U.S. population. The Earth isn't actually a sphere. It's more like a squished ball that bulges at the equator. The bulge is caused by the force of the Earth spinning, which makes the north and south poles slightly flat. The Earth spins on its axis, which is basically an imaginary straight line. Earth has seasons because the axis is tilted, causing the sun's rays to hit different parts of the planet more directly, depending on the time of year. If the sun was as tall as a standard door, the Earth would be around the size of a nickel. The Earth's rate of rotation is gradually decreasing. It's happening so slowly that it would take as much as 140 million years for the length of a day to increase to 25 hours.
Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print.
The biggest animal on Earth is the Antarctic blue whale. It can reach lengths of 100 feet and weigh up to 400,000 pounds, which is around the same as 33 elephants. The temperature at the center of the Earth is around the same as the surface of the Sun, at almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Earth is around 10,000 times older than humans. Earth is around 4.5 billion years old, whereas humans have been around for, at most, 450,000 years. There are around 34,000 known species of fish. The actual number is way higher though, as a whopping 95% of our oceans still haven't been explored. America's Route 66 is longer than the journey to the Earth's core. The distance to the core is roughly 2,000 miles. Route 66 is almost 2,500 miles. The Earth is made up of 3 main components: the crust, the mantle, and the core, which is divided into the outer core and the inner core. Scientists have estimated that there are around 8.7 million species on the planet. Out of this, between 1 to 2 million of these species are animals. But roughly 86% of land species and 91% of fish have yet to be discovered by humans. Ancient astronomers used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. For 2,000 years, they believed the Earth to be static, while other bodies traveled in orbit around us. In 1543, Copernicus published his sun-centered model of the solar system. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. The density varies across its different crusts, but the planet's average density is just over 3 ounces per cubic inch. Mount Everest is the highest point on the planet. Its peak is the highest altitude above sea level at around 5.5 miles. Each year, 1 septillion crystals of snow fall on Earth. That's a trillion snowflakes. Snow covers about 31% of Earth's land area each year. Of Earth's water, only around 3% is fresh water. The other 97% is salted. Of that 3%, about 2% is frozen in ice and glaciers. So, less than 1% of the planet's fresh water is actually in lakes, rivers, and underground. The world's largest inland body of water, or lake to us normal people, is the Caspian Sea. It has an area of 140,000 miles squared. The world's deepest lake is Lake Baikal in Russia and is 5,300 feet deep. Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, with small amounts of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases. No other planet is believed to have this much oxygen, which explains why Earth is the only planet where life has been discovered so far. Apart from the Moon, there are 2 asteroids in co-orbital orbits with Earth, sometimes called Earth's second moon. 3753 Cruithne is an asteroid that looks like it's following the Earth in orbit, but it's actually following its own path around the Sun. 2002 AA29 is another asteroid which makes a horseshoe orbit around the Earth that draws it close to the planet every 95 years.
Ooh, you're diving into the dark and icy waters of Antarctica. The eerie blue darkness is enveloping you, reminiscent of the vast expanse of open space. In these depths, where you least expect to encounter any living creature, you suddenly hear a loud, strange sound. A quacking noise, as if a giant duck was hidden in the deep. In 1960, researchers first recorded this sound and named it bioduck. Clever. For decades, they tried to unravel the mystery of its source. Was it a giant kraken? An extraterrestrial spaceship that had crashed into the ocean? A mysterious sea monster? Or perhaps an enormous duck? There were many versions, one more bizarre than the other. Oceanographers detected similar sounds in other locations as well. Off the western coast of Australia and near New Zealand, they recorded similar but higher pitch signals, which they named bio-goose. It seems the creepy atmosphere of the story disappears with such names. Anyways, these sounds were not isolated incidents. They happened multiple times with consistent intervals. Many initially thought the source must be mechanical, given the regularity of the sounds. However, studying the oceans in the latter half of the 20th century was challenging because of limited technologies. Nevertheless, scientists persisted in collecting data on bioduck and biogoose, driven by their insatiable curiosity. As more data accumulated, so did the theories. But scientists eventually uncovered the mystery. Bioduck turned out to be a form of communication with a biological origin. When researchers analyzed the repeating sounds, they noticed that the signals never overlapped. One source would speak while the others remained silent, suggesting a form of communication. The question remained, which ocean creature possessed such an extraordinary method of communicating through varied frequency sounds? The answer, as many have guessed, is whales. Scientists compared the bioduck sound from Antarctica with the calls of minke whales and found striking similarities. The biogoose sounds from the waters off Australia and New Zealand likely belong to other species or very young minke whales. This discovery, however, only deepened the mystery. What purpose did these sounds serve? Were the whales discussing their dinner plans, laughing at the humans recording their voices, or perhaps sharing deep insights about the universe? The possibilities were endless, but the most astonishing revelation was that humans might one day learn to communicate with these magnificent creatures. Communicating with whales is no longer a far-fetched idea. Scientists from the University of California have already established contact with a humpback whale named Twain. In a groundbreaking experiment, researchers conducted a 20-minute conversation with the marine mammal. Here's how they did it. The specialists went on a marine expedition to the coast of Alaska, where they recorded the sounds of a group of humpback whales. Then they played these sounds through speakers, sending the signals back into the ocean. The recorded sounds resembled a greeting, like, "Hey, what's up?" but in the whale language. These greetings are used by whales to call each other or indicate their location. Now, soon after sending the signals, the researchers received a response. Twain approached the boat, circled it, and replied with a "hey" of its own. This marked the beginning of the first ever human-whale conversation. For 20 minutes, the scientists sent 36 signals to Twain, and each time the whale responded. Moreover, it waited for time intervals before answering. That is, the team received a response from the whale, waited 10 seconds, and turned on the sound again. Researchers then waited 10 seconds and answered. It seems that Twain was a very delicate interlocutor. Maybe it was a gentleman in the whale world, who knows? Or maybe it was simply intrigued by the unusual interaction. The signals used in this communication belonged to a group of whales that included Twain. It's likely that the researchers had recorded Twain's own sounds and used them to communicate with it. In a sense, Twain was conversing with itself. Now let's continue our journey and venture into the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, the Mariana Trench. A quick reminder, the Mariana Trench is a colossal chasm in the ocean floor, stretching over 1,500 miles south of Japan and reaching a depth of nearly 36,000 feet at its deepest point. To put that into perspective, the height of the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, is like 1/10 of the Mariana Trench's depth. Now imagine this. In this deep, dark abyss, scientists recorded a strange sound. Unlike bioduck, this sound resembled something from a science fiction movie, a low rumble, followed by a metallic ping, reminiscent of the sounds made by spaceships in sci-fi movies. Researchers named this mysterious phenomenon biotwang noises. Scientists first detected this strange sound in 2014 during an acoustic survey of the Mariana Trench, and they quickly identified its source: whales, specifically Bride's whales. Using artificial intelligence, researchers analyzed around 200,000 hours of audio recordings from the ocean and found matches with a group of Bride's whales. Like other animals, these whales use sounds as a form of communication. Now, did you know what else was found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? A plastic bottle. It's unlikely it was done by a kraken or a whale or some type of monster. Everything is simpler here. The bottle ended up there because of a human. But that's a topic for another video. Okay, let's deal with one more sound. No whales this time, just a mysterious sound in the loneliest place on Earth. This place is called Point Nemo, and that's why it's so lonely. Located in the South Pacific Ocean, Point Nemo is the most remote spot from any land. The nearest island is 1,450 nautical miles away. It's about the same long distance from land in all other directions. Moreover, here, there's almost no marine life, since few water currents reach this spot, and therefore few nutrients are supplied. In a sense, it's a water desert. And so, in 1997, oceanographers recorded a very strange and frightening sound coming from the depths in the area of Point Nemo. It was something gigantic and scary. People called it the bloop. As soon as journalists found out about this phenomenon, people around the world began to invent the most fantastic versions. The most popular of them was that the sound source was a giant sea monster, kraken, or some other creature. The hype around the bloop didn't last very long. Scientists managed to find out the nature of the mysterious noise. It turned out it belonged to an iceberg. When they crack and collapse, they create powerful ultra-low frequency sounds that can be heard from a very long distance. To confirm this version, scientists recorded the sounds of other icebergs and heard something similar to the bloop. Oh, by the way, Point Nemo is so lonely that space agencies drop out-of-service satellites here. Space objects just fall in the water. There's a 99% chance that no animal or human will be harmed by falling debris in this lonely place. That's why many people call it the satellite cemetery. But what if, someday, a spaceship from another planet falls here? What if it has already fallen in Point Nemo and sometimes emits an emergency signal that breaks through the ocean? Ooh. All the mysteries you have heard have already been solved. How about we end this video with a mystery that still baffles scientists? Meet upsweep. One of the most mysterious sounds ever recorded in the ocean. It's not just noise, it's a series of short ascending tones repeated at intervals of several seconds. It was first discovered in 1991 using hydrophones installed in the Pacific Ocean. At first, oceanographers suggested that upsweep could be associated with volcanic activity or underwater earthquakes. But the seasonal nature of the sound and its intensity change depending on the time of year, which rules out these versions. People began to consider hypotheses related to the biological life of the ocean. They studied the migration routes of marine animals and their behavior at different times of the year. However, despite all efforts, the sound source has not been identified. Some studies suggest that upsweep may be associated with certain species of fish or other marine animals that make sounds for communication or navigation, but no one has been able to prove it. You step on the surface of the moon. It's unusual. You definitely feel lighter here, and it's easier to walk. You decide to check out that obsessive idea of yours, jump on Earth's natural satellite. And even despite your bulky spacesuit, you literally fly up into the air. Woohoo! Anyway, you continue your walk on the surface of the moon when you feel something strange. The ground under your feet is it shaking? It feels as if an earthquake has just started on the moon. But that's simply impossible. Or is it? Surprisingly, your gut feeling hasn't let you down this time. Moonquakes do exist. In fact, there are 4 types of moonquakes that are strong enough to be detected from a large distance. There are deep moonquakes occurring more than 430 miles below the surface. Then there are meteoroid impacts. Thermoquakes occur when the frigid lunar crust expands. It happens when the morning sun illuminates the satellite after a 2-week-long deep freeze lunar night. And there are also shallow moonquakes. They're the only ones that are similar to earthquakes on our planet. Shallow moonquakes happen 12 to 19 miles below the surface, and they're the most powerful and dangerous. Between 1972 and 1977, the Apollo seismic network recorded 28 such moonquakes, and some of them measured more than 5 on the Richter scale. On Earth, such an earthquake is strong enough to crack plaster and move heavy furniture. Plus, shallow moonquakes are very long-lasting in compared to earthquakes. Once they get going, they can continue for up to 10 minutes. As for the average earthquake, it typically continues for 10 to 30 seconds. Scientists are still not sure what causes shallow moonquakes, and even where exactly they occur. One of the theories is that moonquakes happen at the rims of large, relatively young craters that probably slump from time to time. Interestingly, the Moon and Earth aren't the only places where earthquakes occur. No, scientists have recorded quakes, tremors, vibrations, and shakes in other regions of our solar system too. Let's take Mercury, for example. A few years ago, scientists discovered that this planet was shrinking, and that's why it seems to be so tectonically active. Or Venus. This world is a tectonic puzzle for experts. At the moment, Venus has no tectonic plates, and it might have never had them. But its surface has folds and faults and looks as if it could have tectonic plates. On the other hand, these features might have appeared because of other processes, for example, volcanic activity. But even though we haven't observed any Venus quakes, scientists believe they could detect them since their vibration seems to ripple through the thick atmosphere of the planet. Now, Mars. We know for sure that this planet is seismically active. NASA's lander placed a seismometer on the surface of the red planet, and in 2019, it managed to measure its first Mars quake. After that, the lander continued to record quakes, but they were so weak that if they happened on our planet, they'd be completely covered by the background noise of Earth's oceans. But a space body doesn't have to be a full-fledged planet to have active tectonics. Let's take Pluto. This dwarf planet is geologically active at the moment. In 2014, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft was flying through the Pluto system when it recorded complex geological features on this dwarf planet. Scientists concluded that Pluto might have quakes, or should I call them Pluto quakes, when its liquid water ocean freezes and thaws beneath the dwarf planet's icy crust. Jupiter's moons, Europa and Io, as well as Saturn's moons, Titan and Enceladus, are also geologically active despite their small size. Their features range from volcanoes and water plumes to potential subsurface oceans. Now, I bet you don't know these cool facts about earthquakes that occur on our planet. There's one place on Earth where a whopping 90% of all earthquakes occur. It's called the Ring of Fire, and it stretches around the Pacific Ocean from New Zealand all the way to South America. Looks to me more like a horseshoe. Anyway, experts claim that these countless earthquakes are caused by the abundance of volcanoes in that region and the constant movement of the tectonic plates. Around 500,000 earthquakes happen on Earth every year, but many of them occur very, very deep in the Earth's crust. and only special equipment can detect them. We feel around 20% of earthquakes, and only 100 of them can cause damage. The largest recorded earthquake occurred in Chile in May 1960. It was a magnitude 9.5 on the Richter scale. It was truly devastating. During that earthquake, seismographs detected and recorded seismic waves that traveled all over the world. They shook the planet for many days. As for the most powerful earthquake that occurred in the U.S., it was 9.2 and happened in Alaska. By the way, Alaska, along with California, is the most earthquake-prone state in the U.S. and one of the most seismically active regions in the world. A magnitude 7 earthquake occurs there almost every year. A mega-earthquake can actually shorten the length of a day for the entire planet. NASA claims that really large earthquakes can shift our planet's axis and, thus, change the duration of a day. Now, of course, you won't notice it since this change is measured in microseconds, and 1 microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second. Scientists think that the 9.1 Sumatra earthquake, which occurred in 2004, shortened the day by 6.8 microseconds. Now, not even the best specialists can predict an earthquake. That's mostly because the mechanisms that trigger earthquakes are extremely deep underground. But these days, people have learned how to figure out a more precise time frame of when an earthquake might occur. Earthquakes can be triggered by volcanic eruptions or, let's say, meteor impacts, but most of them are caused by the movements of our planet's tectonic plates. Earth's surface consists of 15 to 20 constantly moving tectonic plates. Pressure increases when they shift, and this can make the crust of our planet break. San Francisco is moving toward Los Angeles right at this moment. The speed of its movement is about 2 inches per year. That's as fast as your fingernails grow. It's happening because the two sides of the San Andreas Fault, which is the continental fault extending 750 miles through California, are slipping past each other. So, in several million years, Los Angeles and San Francisco will be neighbors. Lakes, ponds, and canals become slightly warmer and start to stink before an earthquake. It happens because gases get released when tectonic plates shift. Most animals feel these signs and change their behavior. For example, scientists noted toads completely disappearing before an earthquake in Italy in 2009. But as soon as the natural disaster was over, they returned. Even after an earthquake is over, you might still see water sloshing around in your swimming pool. There's no need to worry. This is a phenomenon called a seiche. The water can keep sloshing around for hours after the earthquake is over. For example, the pool at the University of Arizona lost some water from a seiche caused by an earthquake in Mexico that occurred 1,200 miles away. On February 27, 2010, a massive earthquake started in Chile. It measured 8.8 on the Richter scale. As a result, Earth's crust in that region was ripped so dramatically that a city called Concepcion moved 10 feet to the west. Another earthquake resulted in the tallest mountain in the world, Everest, shrinking by 1 inch. It happened in 2015 when a magnitude 7.5 earthquake caused several Himalayan mountains to decrease in size. The Japanese used to believe that earthquakes were caused by namizu, a giant catfish that lives submerged in the mud under the Japanese islands. The fish would thrash about, causing seismic activity. As for the ancient Greeks, they were sure that a powerful sea deity, Poseidon, produced earthquakes by hitting his trident against the earth when he was angry. According to Hindu mythology, 8 elephants hold Earth in place. They are, in turn, balanced on the back of a ginormous turtle, standing on the coils of an even larger snake. And every time any of these animals moves, an earthquake occurs. So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and, honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer-de-lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
You rub your eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Perfect circular holes in the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Big Sur in California. You have no idea how this happened, even though you're a marine biologist who's been practicing it for years. You go through some of the old records and find out that these holes have been around since the 90s. In 1999, a ship-mounted sonar conducted a survey and found 5,200 of these pockmarks, or large holes over 500 square miles, on the ocean floor. They look like moon craters underwater. You contact your team and get the robot ready to go down and explore the scene and bring back a few samples. You and the team drive to the coast and hop on the boat. You're sitting inside controlling the robot with a joystick. Your teammate sets the robot in the water and drives it down. Everything seems normal near the surface, but as the robot goes lower, the pockmarks start appearing. A bunch of boats swift past you, making you lose your balance and focus. The robot turns on the flashlight so you can see better. But as it goes lower, the resolution is less crisp. It almost reaches the bottom, and the holes are smooth and nearly perfect circular shapes. Some of these holes that were visible in the sonar reading measure more than 30 feet across and 15 feet deep. You show the rest of your teammates the images, and they're shocked. The robot continues swimming, but there appear to be more holes all around. Many of them are too small for the scanner to capture from above. These microdepressions are steep and have sort of tails going in a certain direction. It's possible that the currents underwater played a role in their shape. Everywhere the robot swims, there are new holes all around. After a couple of hours, the robot goes back to the boat with some samples. You take them back to the lab and study them. The robot clearly captures images of human trash, but the samples don't indicate anything alarming for now. Despite the fact that 1/3 of the pockets are filled with trash, there's still no explanation of how they were formed. It's late at night and the rest of your team heads back home. You're passing out in the lab, still trying to find some answers. You wake up the next day and while cooking breakfast, you get this idea that maybe these holes are gases venting out, which could be harmful to marine life. You quickly get the robot and sail out to the ocean once more. This time, you didn't even think about calling your teammates. You place the robot in the water and get behind the screen to control it. The robot descends to the bottom of the ocean and does a survey. So far, the holes still seem to be covered with trash. But some of the holes have marine life dwelling inside, like fish and seaweed. After much scanning, it doesn't look like they're producing any bubbles, which means there aren't any gases venting out, but you're determined to find them. After a while, you reach one of those large pockmarks, and the robot starts scanning around. You find some bubbles coming from a source, but the robot can't reach it. It swims around trying to find a spot, but nothing. You bring the robot back to the lab and work on it. You attach some mechanical arms on it that can lift things and move them. You bring the robot back down to the same spot, but the bubbles aren't as frequent as before. You use the arms to move some of the trash and find out that the bubbles are being produced by a group of crabs chilling next to a pile of plastic. Bingo! The bad news is, you still don't have a clue why the microdepressions and pockmarks exist. As you try to control the robot to go back to the surface, an octopus wraps its tentacles around it, pulling the robot down. You struggle with the controls and push it to maximum power, but the suctions of the octopus are too strong to break off. It's a game of tug-of-war with the octopus and your robot. It takes the robot under a pile of trash, thinking it's lunch. But you use the arms to maneuver the robot out and swim back to the surface. You go back to the lab even more confused. The robot has collected more samples for you to study. Your eye is glued to your microscope, trying to figure out what's going on, but nothing. You decide to do a carbon dating test to determine how old these holes are. After a while, you check out the results and are even more stunned than before. They show that the holes are around 400,000 years old, so it's likely that human trash wasn't the cause for all this. You pull many all-nighters trying to figure out the truth. You gather your team once more and hold a small press conference about this. You claim that this may be something we should be extremely worried about, but you still can't tell them more than what you know. With all the brain work put together, you find out that the large pockmarks haven't changed or been active for more than 50,000 years. The newer holes were most likely created by human trash settling in the bottom of the ocean floor. The marine life gathered some of this trash like plastics and discarded fishing gear and created homes for themselves. This is why around 4,500 of the holes are newer and have trash in them. But it still doesn't answer why the holes appeared in the first place. You're back to square one. The only way to see what's really going on is to clear up the trash from underwater and study them. The story makes headlines in the local community and catches the attention of a cleanup crew. You organize a trip to the ocean and begin the extraction of all the trash. Many cleanup boats arrive and everyone drops down a net to collect the trash. You send down the robot once more to make sure the nets are hitting the right spot. As most of the trash is being collected, many marine life animals scramble and try to find a way to escape. Everyone makes sure not to hurt them. After a couple of weeks, all the holes are cleared up from the trash. You do another sonar scan from the surface and can see the holes clearer than before. But you still don't have an answer for this. You do some more research trying to see if any other holes appeared around the world. On the other side of the country is a mysterious blue hole off of Florida's Gulf Coast. You catch the nearest flight to Florida and make an appointment with the scientists in charge of the expedition. Blue holes are underwater sinkholes that open below the seabed. Just like on the surface, the underwater world also has sinkholes. This one is called the Green Banana and is 150 feet below. And the hole is 435 feet deep. You dive with some special gear with the rest of the team to a barren ocean floor, and the hole is right there in front of you, looking like an oasis in the desert. You and the rest of the scientists are surprised by the diverse marine life dwelling within. Some sea turtles swim past you, and even sharks. These ones don't harm humans. Halfway through, you reach a narrow path, which makes it difficult for humans to pass through. But everyone is careful. There are corals, sponges, mollusks around the corner. You collect some samples and go back to the lab. Blue holes in general are richer in nutrients than barren lands and host plenty of unique marine life. They're quite common and don't pose any sort of threat to anyone. After making the connections, you don't think the holes off the coast of California have anything to do with blue holes. The mystery goes on. Frankenstein, unreasonably cold weather, and tons of lava. What do these things have in common? They all trace their origins back to Mount Tambora. This volcano in Indonesia had such a massive impact that the aftermath could be felt in Switzerland even a year later. And these spots are thousands of miles apart. Soon, we might be facing something similar again. Stick around, because I'm about to reveal the exact spot where the next eruption is expected to happen in 2025. Back in 1815, Mount Tambora erupted with unprecedented force, sending a colossal cloud of fine particles into the atmosphere. This cloud reflected sunlight, leading to global cooling and even the year without a summer in 1816. Temperatures plummeted, crops failed, and families worldwide faced food shortages, compounded by various health issues. Fun fact: Frankenstein appeared because of abnormally cold weather in the summer of 1816. The author got stuck indoors in Switzerland and wrote this story to pass the time. But that is the only positive aftermath. In England and Ireland, people struggled to find food. The crops were too bad that year, and this year without summer cost them lives, all because of the eruption in Indonesia. While many other volcanoes have erupted since then, none have had consequences as dramatic as Tambora. However, climate professor Marcus Stoffel from the University of Geneva believes potential serious eruptions aren't just a matter of luck, it's only a matter of time. So it's up to us. We can sit back and wait for the inevitable, or we can start preparing today. This future eruption will happen in a world that's vastly different from the one in 1815. Not only is our planet more densely populated now, but we've also experienced irreversible changes that affect our daily lives. Now, if you think volcanoes are always the bad guys, think again. They've actually played a crucial role in shaping our planet. They help with land formation, atmospheric development, and climate modulation. Just look at Yellowstone, for example. When thick lava oozed to the surface, it spread across the landscape and transformed the area forever. When volcanoes blow their tops, they release a mix of lava, ash, and gases, including carbon dioxide. But don't worry, compared to the emissions from fossil fuels, the amount from volcanoes is pretty tiny. What scientists are really keeping an eye on is sulfur dioxide, because it can have a big impact on our climate. When a major volcanic eruption happens, it can send sulfur dioxide soaring into the stratosphere, which is about 7 miles up in the atmosphere. Once there, it transforms into tiny aerosol particles that scatter sunlight, helping to cool the planet. This cooling effect isn't immediate though. Those particles can hang around for a couple of years and even circulate all around the globe. Nowadays, we've got special equipment to monitor sulfur dioxide emissions from space. Take Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines. During its eruption in 1991, it released around 15 million tons of sulfur dioxide. Now, while that's a lot, it wasn't quite as massive as the eruption of Tambora. Still, Pinatubo managed to lower global temperatures by about 0.5 degrees Celsius for several years. Tambora, on the other hand, dropped average global temperatures by about 1 degree Fahrenheit. I know what you might be thinking. That's not much, but trust me, it makes a difference. If the planet warms up by just 1 degree Fahrenheit, it could really mess with sea levels. Experts think we might see a rise of up to 8 inches by the end of this century. This could wipe out a lot of farmland and coastal habitats, which would be a huge blow to many communities. So maybe a volcano eruption that can cool off the planet is like a natural mechanism helping us out? Not exactly. While it does cool the planet off, don't get tricked into thinking it's the kind of coolness our planet needs. Such temperature shifts can severely mess up with the crops, like they did in 1816. There's also evidence that major eruptions can disrupt rainfall patterns, leading to drier conditions in monsoon regions across Africa and Asia. You see, the summer monsoon relies on the temperature difference between land and ocean, which can be altered by volcanic activity. Interestingly, a warmer climate may enhance the cooling effects of volcanic eruptions. Experts explain that the formation and movement of aerosol particles depend on climate conditions. As global temperatures rise, faster air circulation can lead to smaller aerosol particles, which are more effective at scattering sunlight and thereby intensifying the cooling effect. Oceans also contribute to this dynamic. A warming ocean surface creates a stratified layer, hindering the mixing of warm and cold water, which could mean that volcanic eruptions primarily cool the upper ocean layer and the atmosphere above it, according to Stoffel. Moreover, climate change may influence volcanic systems directly. The melting of ice can trigger more eruptions by reducing the pressure that allows magma to ascend more easily. Additionally, increased rainfall associated with climate change can seep into the ground and interact with magma, potentially sparking eruptions. While the prospect of a cooling period due to a volcanic eruption might seem beneficial amid climate change, scientists warn that the effects could be dire. The immediate consequences could be severe, particularly for the estimated 800 million individuals residing near active volcanoes. A major eruption could devastate entire cities. For example, Campi Flegrei, located near Naples, Italy, is showing signs of increased activity and threatens the lives of about 1 million people. Now, if you're from Oregon, beware, as experts say this state might experience volcano eruptions. Are you scared? Don't be. It's actually not as scary as it seems. Let me explain why. There are more than 80 volcanoes in Oregon, but we're not interested in a single one of them because it's an underwater volcano that is likely to erupt in 2025. Axial Seamount is the most active volcano in the Pacific Northwest, yet it remains largely unknown to the public due to its location approximately 300 miles offshore and nearly a mile beneath the ocean surface. While its upcoming eruption is expected to pose no threat of a tsunami or significant land-based earthquakes because of its depth and distance from the Cascadia Fault, the data gathered from studying its eruptions can enhance our monitoring of potentially more hazardous volcanoes. Let's call it a friendly eruption, shall we? In reality, predicting eruptions is a complex endeavor. We often encounter alarming headlines, such as, "Yellowstone is about to erupt." Should we take these claims seriously? Not really. Yes, Yellowstone sits atop an active supervolcano that has experienced 3 major explosive eruptions in the past 2.1 million years. The last eruption occurred approximately 70,000 years ago, with the most significant explosion taking place around 631,000 years ago, forming the massive Yellowstone caldera. Naturally, many people are curious about whether Yellowstone will erupt again and when that might happen. Fortunately, scientists are employing new techniques to delve into these questions. A recent study suggests that Yellowstone is unlikely to experience another major eruption anytime soon. The reason is that the magma beneath the park is divided into a network of separate chambers. While there is a substantial amount of magma present, it's not sufficiently interconnected to support an eruption. Previous studies proposed that the existence of a massive layer of magma beneath Yellowstone, but these latest findings change that notion. To gain a clearer understanding of the subterranean dynamics, Researchers utilized a technique called magnetotellurics, which employs Earth's natural electromagnetic fields rather than seismic waves. Since magma is a good conductor of electricity, this method is particularly effective for mapping molten rock and comprehending underground activity in volcanically active regions. By using magnetotellurics, scientists created a detailed map of the magma under Yellowstone, enabling them to make more informed predictions about future eruptions. But what will happen if an eruption similar to Mount Tambora occurs? By and large, there will be huge climate chaos. Yeah, the best scientists are looking for the solution should it really happen, but they don't have it yet. So technically, we're not ready for the second Mount Tambora. But for now, we're pretty much safe. No major eruptions are predicted. Whew! When you mention your plans to travel to Tristan da Cunha, the chances are your friends won't even know where this remote island is located. No wonder. Tristan da Cunha is considered the most remote inhabited archipelago in the world, with the nearest populated land, St. Helena, around 1,500 miles away. There are only 229 people living on Tristan da Cunha now. In such a close-knit community, everyone is someone's cousin, uncle, or maybe just a friend, but everyone knows each other for sure. There are as few as 10 last names on the island, representing just 10 families. Getting there is quite an adventure. There are no airports on the island, which means your journey will be primarily by sea. Typically, it requires a days-long voyage from South Africa. Only 3 ships regularly service the island, with fewer than a dozen trips each year. Some cruise lines may include it in their itineraries, but travel arrangements must be made well in advance, due to limited berths available on the ship from Cape Town. And you'll also need landing permission. While Tristan doesn't have traditional hotels, there are several guest houses, and you might also have the chance to stay with a local family. They will provide you with a place to sleep, 3 meals a day, and laundry services. 88% of what you pay goes directly to the island family, and only 12% is tax. By the way, the accommodation is surprisingly affordable. It was around £65 for a full board in 2024. Yep, they do use sterling, being a part of overseas British territory. But there's also this local currency called St. Helena Pound, used at parity with sterlings. By the way, it's only been around 80 years since the island started using actual money. In 1942, the naval station began paying cash wages, and it helped Tristan Islanders to move from a barter economy to a cash-based system, and allowed them the novelty of making their first cash purchases. Just a heads up, pack everything you might need before you go, as you definitely won't come across Walmart there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a supermarket and all, but it's just not the way you're used to, with endless shelves displaying endless oversized mayo jars. Tristan's Island Store, often referred to as the supermarket, lacks plate glass windows and flashy advertisements, and let's be honest, it looks like an abandoned barn from the outside. Still, it plays a crucial role in providing essential goods to complement locally produced foods and woolens. If a resident wants to buy something, they must place orders months in advance for items that arrive with incoming ships. The store operates Monday through Friday. Today, the islanders continue to cultivate their own crops and raise livestock. The supermarket has become a vital source for other essentials like flour, sugar, and a variety of groceries including frozen bread and products typical of the UK or South African supermarkets. And even though the island's economy relies heavily on fishing, especially rock lobsters, islanders are largely self-sufficient. Let's move to another destination that's super hard to reach, but this time it's a level up in difficulty. I'm talking about the notorious Hypoxia City, the place with the smallest amount of oxygen on the planet. Sure thing, it's a nickname. The real name is La Rinconada. This place is located in Peru. Getting there means climbing over 16,000 feet up into the mountains. And what did you expect from the highest city on Earth? Despite its hard-to-reach location, it houses way more people than Tristan da Cunha, between 30,000 and 50,000. And while the island in the middle of nowhere looks idyllic, The Peruvian city of La Rinconada has very different looks. The urban layout features predominantly low-rise residences, where essential services are limited. La Rinconada is without a reliable supply of running water and lacks a sewage system. The community does not have a waste collection service, which forces residents to either burn or bury their garbage. Moreover, up until the early 2000s, La Rinconada did not have access to electricity. Most things, including the most essential foods, must be brought here from outside. Despite originally being a miner city, right now it has a wider range of activities to make your living. Some people are busy with trading, food, clothes, you name it. Others provide services, and some people even open public restrooms. Architectural-wise, La Rinconada has very little to offer. The pattern is quite predictable. Huts made from corrugated metal that are unstable and rusting. The choice of materials is dictated by practicality. These metal sheets are the lightest and easiest for miners to transport to the glacier. Unfortunately, the homes lack proper insulation, leaving residents shivering in the cold even though they have access to wool from local sheep, which is an excellent insulator. Sturdier rock homes exist but are rare, typically inhabited by wealthier miners. While the architecture might not be particularly captivating, the vistas certainly are. In nearly every spot in La Rinconada, a glance upward reveals La Bella Durmiente, or Sleeping Beauty, a massive glacier towering over the town. Getting to La Rinconada is very hard. First, you'll need to fly into Alejandro Velasco Astete International Airport in Cusco, Peru. Once you're in Cusco, you can catch a train or a bus to Puno, which is right by Lake Titicaca. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. The only way to really get up to La Rinconada is by hitchhiking or finding a ride into the mountains. There might be some buses, but they don't run on a set schedule. If you're up for it, you can rent a car, but be warned, the roads can be pretty rough and tricky to navigate. So a little extra caution goes a long way on this adventure. Unlike Tristan da Cunha, where they adopted cashback in the 1940s, La Rinconada doesn't rely much on it. The economy of this place is based mainly on gold mines. The mines are unguarded, unregulated, and often dangerous. Miners work for 30 days under a cachorreo system, where on the 31st day, they're allowed to take as much ore from the mine as they can carry as a form of payment. La Rinconada has no bank, but it has many storefront fund transfer agencies, which miners use to wire money to their families. Still, they never know how much they're gonna send. Our next destination is Svalbard, a place that might seem unwelcoming due to its climate. But locals embrace everyone with open arms. No visa is required if you want to visit or even work there. Located near the top of the world, Svalbard offers a unique and remote charm. The capital, Longyearbyen, is home to a fascinatingly diverse community, with over 50 nationalities represented among its 2,400 residents. You might even spot a polar bear wandering into town on occasion. The living space is compact. There's just one grocery store, and the streets are numbered instead of named, adding to the town's distinctive feel. Longyearbyen also boasts a university center with around 300 students. Interestingly, every student must learn to use firearms for safety in the surrounding wilderness. Originally, it was founded as a mining town, just like La Rinconada, but the focus has shifted mainly to tourism. However, a quirky tradition remains from its mining days. Visitors and residents alike take off their shoes when entering hotels and restaurants, a practice born out of the need to keep coal dust at bay. The last destination for today is Palmerston Island, a remote coral atoll in the Cook Islands, located about 290 miles northwest of Rarotonga. Famous traveler James Cook visited it on June 16, 1774, and the place was uninhabited at the time, despite ancient graves found there. Today, the island supports a small population of just 25 residents, primarily descendants of 19th century English sailor William Marsters. Marsters arrived in 1863 with 2 Polynesian wives and later added a third. He fathered 23 children. Fishing is the mainstay of the local economy, resembling subsistence living due to the island's isolation. Modern amenities and communication services are available. Although there's no airport, cargo ships visit periodically. Doctor, I can't understand what's going on. I feel dizzy and, how do I say it? I'm tilting. It didn't happen overnight. Like, I didn't wake up and couldn't stand straight. No, one day, I felt that my axis had shifted by 1 inch. Another day, it was 2 inches. And once, you won't believe it, it was 31.5 inches. That's alarming. What if I accidentally turned upside down and all my inhabitants fall off my surface? Ah, dear Earth. We ran some tests and are ready to explain an unfortunate combination of factors that has affected your axis. The last one will perhaps be the most unexpected and upsetting. It all started back in March 2011, when a devastating magnitude 9 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan. It was so powerful that not only did it shift Earth's axis, but it also shortened the length of the day. This earthquake displaced our planet's axis by approximately 6.5 inches and may have moved Japan's main island by about 8 feet. Like other similarly massive earthquakes, it also altered Earth's rotation speed. To make it easier, let's compare it to a spinning ice skater. When a skater pulls their arms close to their body, they spin faster by concentrating their mass near the axis of rotation. Something similar happens during the most powerful earthquakes. They shift Earth's mass closer to its rotational axis, causing it to spin faster and shortening the day length. The calculations showed that the Japanese earthquake sped up Earth's rotation by about 1.8 microseconds, which is about 1.8 millionths of a second. Not a big deal, but at the end of the day, every nanosecond counts. For comparison, the infamous Indonesian earthquake shortened the length of a day by 2.68 microseconds. It struck on December 26, 2004, at 0:58 UTC. The epicenter lay off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. This powerful undersea earthquake triggered devastating tsunamis that swept across the Indian Ocean, causing widespread destruction and immense loss of life in countries like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. Even coastal areas as far as East Africa had severe damage. The Earth's magnitude, initially recorded at 9.0 on the Richter scale, was later adjusted to between 9.1 and 9.3, making it the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Asia. The faulting, that's when Earth's crust completely breaks and its parts slide past each other, lasted between 500 and 600 seconds, and it was the longest duration ever observed. The immense force of the quake caused the entire planet to vibrate by at least half an inch and triggered other earthquakes as far away as Alaska. All that immense energy the earthquake released caused subtle but quite measurable changes to Earth. The shift in mass slightly changed the planet's rotation, shortening the day. It also caused a small wobble in Earth's axis from 1 to 2.4 inches toward 145° east longitude. So, when it comes to changes in Earth's rotation speed and axis, it's all about the redistribution of mass. This can happen naturally through disasters, but human activities can also trigger it. Take the Three Gorges Dam, for instance. This massive structure across the Yangtze River in China's Hubei province may seem to be an engineering triumph, but it's pretty ambiguous. Finished in 2012 after nearly 20 years, this massive dam is 7,660 feet long and 607 feet high. And yes, it is so big that it can affect the way our planet spins. Its reservoir is capable of holding 9.5 cubic miles of water, has enough mass to slightly alter the Earth's rotational inertia, slightly slowing the planet's rotation. According to NASA, the Three Gorges Dam reservoir could shift Earth's pole position by almost 1 inch and increase the length of a day by 0.06 microseconds. Dams aren't the only worry. If polar ice melts, water rushes into the oceans, hiking up sea levels, especially near the equator. This mass shift slows Earth's spin way more than dams do. You won't feel it day to day, but it can affect ultra-precise equipment, such as atomic clocks. To fix this, scientists suggested a negative leap second, making a minute 59 seconds, to balance Earth's spin changes. Okay, so you're thinking you've got nothing to do with all those tilts. You don't build dams, right? Bad news. If you take regular showers, you're part of it too. Every time you turn on the tap, you're affecting Earth's tilt just a tiny bit. Thing is, our planet is always shifting and adapting, so even small actions like using water can influence its orientation. Over the past 2 decades, groundwater pumping has caused the Earth's tilt to shift by 31.5 inches. This water redistribution is equal to about 0.24 inches of sea level rise. It turns out that among climate-related causes, groundwater redistribution has the largest impact on the drift of Earth's rotational pull. But what is groundwater? It's the water stored beneath the Earth's surface, filling the spaces in soil, sand, and rock. It comes from rain and other precipitation that seeps into the ground, collecting in underground reservoirs, aquifers. Unlike rivers and lakes, groundwater stays below the surface, acting like a natural water reserve. Thanks to it, we have a steady supply even during dry periods. Many people, especially in rural areas, rely on groundwater as their main source of drinking water. Farmers use it to irrigate crops, while industries depend on it for manufacturing and cooling systems. It sounds pretty harmless, doesn't it? How can something so useful cause our planet to shift? Well, a study covering data from 1993 to 2010 revealed that we've pumped about 2,150 gigatons of groundwater in that time. And this large-scale water removal has shifted the Earth's tilt and rotation. After we use groundwater, much of it eventually flows into the oceans, contributing to rising sea levels. In areas like Western North America and Northwestern India, people use a lot of groundwater, and it may have a connection to these shifts. Yikes, let's face it. All these findings are rather disturbing. But you know, understanding the impact of groundwater use is already a huge step in the right direction. Hey, I'm not done yet. This tilting issue isn't just about stuff happening on Earth. We also need to look at space. We've talked a lot about water, right? Well, you know that the moon has a big role in that. Its gravity is super important for forming tides and all that. So one more thing that affects our planet a lot is the gradual movement of the moon away from Earth. These two bodies interact gravitationally, which makes Earth's rotation slow over time, even though significant events like earthquakes occasionally speed it up temporarily. How did we figure it out? Glad you asked. Once, someone paid attention to ancient corals. After analyzing them, scientists realized that Earth had once rotated much faster. The thing is, corals grow by laying down thin layers of calcium carbonate. They do it daily, and variations reflect seasonal changes. By counting these layers, scientists have calculated the number of days in a year millions of years ago. They found that Earth had about 420 days per year 444 to 419 million years ago. But over time, the moon's influence had caused Earth's rotation to slow. And now we only have 365 days in a year. I feel robbed, you know? At the moment, the moon is moving 1.5 inches away from Earth each year. That's about the same speed at which your fingernails grow. Astronomers have figured it out with the help of special mirrors placed on the moon during the Apollo missions. For over 50 years, researchers have been sending laser beams to these mirrors and measuring the time it took for the light to bounce back. In any case, dear Earth, at the moment, your condition isn't critical. As for your inhabitants, they won't fall off your surface. All thanks to your gravity, pulling them toward your center. Just don't switch it off, and everything's going to be fine.
You come to sunny California and go for a hike in the San Lucia Mountains. There, you have a strange, unpleasant feeling, as if someone's watching you. You look around but don't see a single soul. That's when you glance at the tops of distant mountains in front of you and your heart skips a beat. Up on the peaks, you can see the outline of a giant humanoid figure, arms stretched out with a magnificent full rainbow circling it. This mysterious figure is dressed in all black. You can't make out any facial expressions or detail, but you can see it moving. Then it vanishes right before your eyes. Congrats! You've just witnessed the Dark Watchers, a phenomenon that's been terrifying hikers in the California mountains for over 300 years. Even now, scientists can't give an exact explanation for this mysterious appearance. What we do know is it's completely natural. Probably. One theory claims that there are no silhouettes at all. The human brain just thinks up images created by shadows the clouds cast on the mountains. Over the centuries, people share stories about this legend, and their minds begin to show it, building recognizable objects. The same can happen to you, like when you see the contours of a human face on a burnt piece of toast or the shape of a dog in a passing cloud. The most accepted scientific explanation is what's called a Bakken specter. It's when sunlight gets bent by drops of fog or clouds. That explains the rainbow surrounding these figures. As for the shadow, it's only your own being stretched and projected on the mountains before you. After all, these figures usually show up when the sun is behind the witness. Natural or not, the vanishing mysterious figures scared the wits out of you. So we head to Antarctica. Snow, ice, and more blinding sun. Yep, it's a desert too. The light is almost blinding. You squint and off in the distance, you see something red sticking out from all the surrounding endless white. As you get closer, you realize it's a waterfall, an ominous red cascade flowing from the glacier. Splashes fly in all directions and stain the white snow. Don't worry, these so-called blood falls are nothing of the sort. Millions of years ago, hey, I wasn't around then, a glacier formed over a pond and blocked access to sunlight, heat, and oxygen. Then the pond managed to break through the glacier with a little trickle of water. When such salty waters with high levels of iron meets oxygen, it creates that scarlet rust color. This is the only waterfall of its kind in the world. As soon as you come to the Namib Desert, you immediately notice something very strange. Sprinkled among the dry grasslands are almost perfect circles of dirt where nothing grows. These massive polka dots are called fairy circles, and, you guessed it, nobody really knows what causes them. The likely culprit is termites eating the grass around their underground colony. That could also explain the circles' differing sizes. The bugs continue to eat as the colony expands outwards, but they stop before they encroach on a neighboring colony. Well, that's neighborly. The patches where you do see grass show a sort of boundary separating different termite populations. So goes the theory. Heading down to Australia's Lake Hillier. Your eyes don't deceive you. Yes, that lake is bubblegum pink and is perfectly safe to swim in. The giant pink puddle is a salt lake, and it's not the only one of its kind in the world. Salt lakes are pink because of a kind of algae and other microorganisms living in them. They produce a red pigment to protect themselves from the sun. What's unique about Lake Hillier, though, is the water is still pink even if you scoop it up into a glass, and it remains bright pink all year round. The same can't be said about other pink lakes. Southeast Asia. You see a tree that looks as if someone poured paint all over it. But the rainbow eucalyptus was painted by nature. Its unusual bark changes colors over time, like a kaleidoscope. It starts off as a bright green shade, then red, orange, purple, and finally brown. Then the colorful cycle starts again. Blood rain looks more terrifying than any horror movie, but in reality, there's nothing strange or unnatural about this weather phenomenon. People have known about such scarlet-tinted rains since the times of ancient Rome. Sometimes, powerful winds lift red dust into the atmosphere and carry it far, far away, to another galaxy. In the end, this dust gets mixed with clouds, which colors the rain. By the way, dust from coal mines can make the rain black. Pollen is responsible for yellow rains, and some other kinds of dust can turn rainwater white. Back in 2009, people in Ishikawa, Japan saw a kind of rain no one's ever seen before. It was raining tadpoles. The first reason was that the wind that day was so strong it lifted and carried all those tadpoles away in no time. The second possible reason was that big birds such as gulls just dropped them while they were flying to their nests. Some scientists believe these creatures were hauled off the ground by a waterspout and rained down later. By the way, that day people found not only tadpoles, but also frogs and fish instead of puddles. And yep, it can be raining worms too. Some people claim they've seen snake rains. Yikes! And instead of common raindrops, people have watched translucent jelly-like blobs falling down from the skies. Now, Australian spiders are notorious, and to frighten people, they've even learned how to rain. Spider rains are a pretty common thing in Australia because of ballooning. They climb up trees, then spin strands of silk, and that's why the wind can carry them away. Usually people don't notice it, but when it's wet, hundreds of spiders climb up to more desirable places. People say that when it rains or snows, it's possible to see spiders literally drift down on those webs as if they were balloons. If you ever travel to the Mekong River, you'll probably have a chance to see glowing balls rising up from the water and beelining straight into the air. The locals call these the Naga fireballs. Sizes may vary, so these reddish balls can be as tiny as a cherry and as large as a watermelon. During the night, you can see dozens and sometimes even thousands of fireballs. Scientists don't have any solid explanation why it happens, but it's probably flammable gas released by the marshy environment. Still, a local superstition claims it's all because of a giant serpent living in the Mekong. Now, shelf clouds look like something from a sci-fi movie. They form when warm and moist air gets caught in a thunderstorm updraft. These ominous clouds most often mean a storm is coming. Breathtaking rainbow clouds appear on top of cotton-like puffy clouds after thunderstorms. The puffy clouds are low-altitude ones. When the water vapor they contain condenses, the resulting droplets act like prisms. This forms multicolored caps over the clouds. Morning glory clouds are extremely rare. They look like massive tubes stretching across the sky. Most researchers agree that these clouds appear when an updraft squeezes through the cloud. This creates the signature rolling appearance. The cool air at the back of the cloud makes it sink downward. The best, but not the only place to see morning glory is Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria. If you decide to travel there to see these clouds, choose a period from late September or October to early November. Huge white lumps over your head are called mammatus clouds. They make you believe the sky is falling. Most clouds form when air rises in the atmosphere, but not mammatus ones. They appear when moist and cool air goes down and mixes with dry air. The result? Unique puffed rice clouds. By the way, if you spot this phenomenon, bad weather is just around the corner. Whoa, mama! If you get to the bottom of the Caribbean just off the coast of Cuba, you'll see circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. Why was a large city abandoned? Lots of people believe the ruins once belonged to a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. Such disc and donut structures often occur around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Those who have ever heard an annoying sound a kettle makes when the water is boiling can imagine what the whistle sounds like. Even though this noise isn't as blood-curdling as some other unexplained sounds, it doesn't make the whistle any less mysterious. It's incredibly elusive. In 1997, only one underwater microphone was able to pick it up. At that time, researchers didn't manage to pinpoint the source of the noise. The most likely cause of the unusual sound is the eruption of one of the submarine volcanoes. But once again, there's not enough proof to make sure. We all know that space missions come with a hefty price tag. To break it down, a ticket to space for an astronaut starts at around $20 million and can soar up to $50 million. NASA may be a well-funded organization, But you can bet they're always on the lookout to cut costs and save millions wherever they can. Plus, NASA has long realized they do not need to go to Saturn's moon to study if there's life there. We already have the suitable conditions for extraterrestrial life in Wyoming. If that resonates with you, then you already understand why NASA is so interested in Yellowstone. To explore life beyond Earth, we need to study environments that mimic extraterrestrial conditions. That's where all those hot springs come into play. Now, it's not the entire park that piques NASA's interest. Let's leave the bears, moose, and other Earthlings to our local biologists. The real hotspot is the geysers, where microbial life flourishes. Oh, by the way, Yellowstone has more geysers and hot springs than the rest of the world combined. In some of them, water can reach temperatures as high as 192 degrees Fahrenheit. You might think, hey, that's only good for steeping tea. But here's the thing. Life in the form of microbes not only survives but thrives in these extreme conditions, having adapted specifically to them. So, could these microbes help us find life on other planets? Absolutely. Now, let's shine the spotlight on the real superstar, the Grand Prismatic Spring. It's packed with silica, which gives it that stunning color. Silica reflects sunlight, especially the blue wavelengths, which is why it looks so vibrant. The coolest part, though, is not the color, but the fact that this spring can teach us a lot about how life evolved. Way back around 4.5 billion years ago, I wasn't around then, living things didn't know how to harness energy from sunlight yet, so they were using chemical processes instead, just like they do now at the Grand Prismatic Spring. But why are we talking about other planets? Well, if life on Earth kicked off in a comparable way to what we see in Yellowstone, there's a good chance we could find something similar elsewhere in the universe. And if we could nail down exactly how life started here, we could really fine-tune our search for life on other planets. Geysers, very similar to those in Yellowstone, can be found on moons like Enceladus, which orbits Saturn, and Triton, which is a moon of Neptune. But how do they compare to the geysers we see in Yellowstone? Well, back in 1989, NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft made a groundbreaking discovery when it spotted geysers on Triton. This was the first time anyone had seen a geyser outside of Earth, not counting the volcanic eruptions on Jupiter's moon, Io, that were found by Voyager 1 in 1979. Since then, more geysers have been found on other moons in our solar system. In Yellowstone, geysers are heated by hot water from deep within the Earth. However, geysers on some of the outer moons get their heat from tidal forces, the gravitational pull from the big planets they orbit. You know how ocean tides on Earth are affected by the moon and the sun? Well, these moons experience something similar, but on a much larger scale. Beneath the icy surfaces of these moons are warm, salty oceans that stay liquid because the thick ice above keeps them insulated. As the moons move closer and further from their parent planets, the constant tugging creates heat, causing the warm water below to shoot out into space whenever there's a crack in the ice. This icy crust and the warm water underneath are a bit like a frozen pond on Earth. But could there be life swimming around in these hidden oceans, just like there are critters thriving beneath the ice of a pond? That's something scientists want to find out. NASA hopes to send advanced spacecraft to explore these distant moons and look for signs of life. But those warm oceans are buried miles beneath the frozen surface. So, how do we reach them? The answer may lie in geysers. In February 2019, a group of planetary scientists decided to visit Yellowstone in the winter to study the similarities between Earth's geysers and those in space. They know that Yellowstone's geysers are home to some tough little microbes called extremophiles, which thrive in extreme conditions like hot or acidic water. The researchers wanted to learn as much as they could about these microbes and the environments they live in. They brought along a bunch of scientific tools to measure things like temperature, pH levels, and oxygen in the water. They also used special instruments to analyze the chemicals in the ice and rocks and sniff the air for gases. Plus, they collected samples of rock, ice, and water from the geysers, catching tiny droplets on sheets of foil coated in geyser spray. Their main target was the Great Fountain Geyser in Yellowstone's Midway Geyser Basin, which puts on a spectacular show 2 to 3 times a day. However, visiting in winter posed some challenges. Some scientists were delayed by snowy weather, arriving late at night right before they were supposed to enter the park. Then their SUV got stuck in a snowdrift and had to be rescued by a snowplow. The next day, riding in a snow coach, the team had to trudge through deep snow for nearly a mile to reach the geyser, keeping an eye out for elk, bison, and even bears. As they made their way to the Great Fountain Geyser, they took breaks to gather samples and measurements from other interesting pools along the way, like Lemon Pool and Surprise Pool. Even though Yellowstone feels remote, it's not nearly as far away as places like Enceladus and Triton. It's a unique natural laboratory that can teach us a lot about life on Earth and potentially beyond. Oh, as for labs, the Great Prismatic Spring may count as one. Look at these guys. Under the microscope, they look like matches. Their official Latin name is Thermus aquaticus. They live in this hot spring, and these bacteria have saved millions of people's lives. Now, if you're skeptical about what I just said, then you need to know that these bacteria help to create the basis of PCR tests widely used in today's medicine to give fast and precise diagnosis. Back in the 60s, a microbiologist named Thomas Brock was exploring the park's superheated thermal pools and stumbled upon something amazing. Brock was super interested in bacteria that could thrive in extreme conditions. During his 10-year journey studying geysers and thermal springs, he found a microbe in a spring called mushroom pool that could survive in nearly boiling water. This little guy, Thermus aquaticus, turned out to be a game changer for science. Why? Well, it's crucial for a technique called PCR, also known as polymerase chain reaction, which is used to quickly make copies of DNA samples. Before Brock's discovery, this process was tricky because the heat could damage the enzymes that hold DNA together. But thanks to Thermus aquaticus, scientists could now heat and cool DNA samples without breaking them down, making everything faster and easier. It all happened because researchers had purified an enzyme called tag polymerase out of this organism. Those Yellowstone microbes could also be your new go-to for a delicious and sustainable breakfast. A unique microbe was discovered there during some NASA-funded research, and it's now being transformed into tasty vegan breakfast patties and cream cheese. Originally found in a hot spring, this little wonder is called Fusarium strange flavolapsus, and it caught the attention of space enthusiasts as a powerful protein source for long space missions. Plus, it requires way less water and land than beef, making it a smart choice for the planet. Researchers initially looked at this microbe for biofuel, but soon realized it could be cultivated into a complete protein with a texture reminiscent of chicken. Marked as FY, it can be turned into a variety of food products, all thanks to a fermentation process that keeps it free from contaminants. Oh, almost forgot. NASA is even working on a bioreactor to grow FY in space. Ooh, stay tuned.
For hundreds of years, people in the US have reported hearing strange, loud booms. These mysterious sounds are called skyquakes. And yep, it's a real thing. If you've ever heard a loud, distant booming noise that definitely wasn't a thunderstorm or a car engine backfire, congrats, it looks like you've experienced a skyquake yourself. People report them all around the globe, from the US to India and Japan. They go under different names, and we still don't know why exactly they happen. Sometimes these booms come together with earthquakes. People heard them during the New Madrid earthquakes in the early 19th century and up until January 2020. Those who've experienced them describe skyquakes as a rushing or rolling noise. Famous American writer James Fenimore Cooper described it more poetically as the lake speaking to the surrounding hills, which send back the echoes of its voice in accurate reply. Sometimes these mysterious booms happen in cold weather instead of during earthquakes. One of the skyquake hotspots is near Lake Seneca in New York. They call them the Seneca Guns. The booms can be so loud that they shake windows and doors. Back in August 1886, after an earthquake in Charleston, people heard these noises for several weeks, happening at the same time as many aftershocks from the earthquake. In 2020, scientists from the University of North Carolina looked at old news pieces, especially from North Carolina, where people have often reported these sounds. They hoped to match the noises with earthquakes data, but they didn't find any link between the sounds and earthquakes. One of the researchers said they believe the noises are happening in the air, not underground. The team looked at infrasounds, which are low-frequency noises that humans can't hear. They found signals lasting 1 to 10 seconds that match the times when people reported hearing the booms, but nothing is certain here. Some people think that solar flares, underwater tsunamis, or caves collapsing under the sea cause skyquakes. Others believe the sounds come from planes making loud sonic booms. But that doesn't explain old records of skyquakes from the past before planes were even invented. Some scientists think a type of meteor called a bolide causes these booms. These meteors blow up when they hit Earth's atmosphere. If this happened above thick clouds, the sound would get louder and travel far, but we wouldn't find anything on the ground. Another idea is that gas might be escaping from the bottom of deep lakes, like Lake Seneca. If you think skyquakes are bizarre, let me introduce you to fog bows. They also go under the name of white rainbows, ghost rainbows, or cloud bows. They form in a similar way to regular colorful rainbows, but are much wider. Rainbows happen when there are big raindrops in the sky, and you can always spot them on the opposite side of where the sun is shining. Fog bows are made by tiny droplets in fog, or clouds, instead of big raindrops, and they also appear opposite the sun. If you want to see a fog bow, you need to look for it in a thin fog when the sun is bright. You might catch one when the sun starts to shine through the fog, or if you're near the ocean where fog often forms. Because the water droplets in fog are so tiny, fog bows don't have bright colors like rainbows. They might even look all white, or just have faint colors. Some fog bows are hard to see at first because they blend into the mist, but once you spot them, they're easy to recognize. The next rare weather phenomenon you gotta watch out for is thundersnow. You guessed it right, it's a special type of thunderstorm that happens during a snowstorm. Unlike regular thunderstorms that often strike in the spring and summer, thundersnow is much rarer because it happens in the strongest winter storms, like big blizzards, and at the same time needs warm air, which isn't a frequent combo. So, for thundersnow to happen, there needs to be moisture in the air, some instability, and something to lift the air like rising winds. Just like in normal thunderstorms, lightning can appear when you hear thunder. Thundersnow lightning usually goes from cloud to cloud instead of hitting the ground, and the thunder sounds different too, more like a low rumble instead of a loud boom, because the snow muffles the sound. You aren't so likely to get struck by it, but it's still important to stay inside when you hear thunder to stay safe. Northern Lights fans, this one is for you. Scientists noticed a new kind of glow in the sky that looked like a purple streak. They nicknamed it Steve as a joke, but later gave it a more scientific name: Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement, Steve for short. Steve is actually a fast-moving stream of super hot gas that always moves west and only shows up before midnight. They wondered if something like Steve could happen after midnight, but moving in the opposite direction. And now, scientists think they found the anti-Steve by looking at data from a research station in Norway. In December 2021, they took a picture of a bright purple streak stretching for 620 miles in the sky, and it only appeared after midnight. Satellites from the European Space Agency also measured the conditions in this part of the sky and found that the ions were moving eastward. Steve's late-night twin hasn't been officially named yet, but it would be cool if it was called SAM, which is short for Steve After Midnight. If you've ever seen snow on a sunny day when falling from the sky without a single cloud, it must have been diamond dust. It's a special kind of weather with millions of tiny ice crystals forming close to the ground. These ice crystals float slowly in the air, kind of like how dust floats in your house. When sunlight hits these crystals, they sparkle like diamonds. Unlike regular snow, diamond dust can fall from a cloudless sky, which is why they sometimes call it clear sky precipitation. It happens because of temperature inversion. Normally, it gets colder as you go higher up from the ground. But in a temperature inversion, the cold air stays near the ground, and warmer air sits above it. The warm air has more water vapor, and when it mixes with cold air near the ground, it turns directly into ice crystals, and diamond dust is born. For this to happen, the air near the ground has to be really, really cold, way below freezing temperature. Diamond dust can fall for days, but it's so light that it usually doesn't pile up on the ground like regular snow. A fall streak hole, also known as a hole punch cloud, is next on our list. This big circular or oval-shaped gap sometimes appears in certain clouds. These types of clouds float high up in the sky and are often made of tiny water droplets that are colder than freezing, but they haven't frozen yet. These special water droplets are called supercooled, and they need a reason to freeze. Ice crystals give them that reason. When a plane flies through the cloud, it can bring those ice crystals into the cloud. Once the ice crystals are there, the supercooled water droplets freeze quickly, get bigger, and start to fall from the ground. This creates a hole in the cloud, and as more nearby droplets freeze, the hole gets bigger and spreads outward. Any tornado is scary, but a fire tornado takes the horror to a new level. These bad boys are spinning towers of flame and ash that form when there's extreme heat, strong winds, and uneven ground. The intense heat from the fire causes hot air to rise quickly. Cooler air from the sides rushes in to replace it and creates strong winds. When winds from different directions meet, it makes the fire spin like a tornado. It gets stronger and can even create its own weather. It pulls in flames, ash, dirt, and anything in its path. The winds can reach speeds of over 140 miles per hour, and these fire tornadoes can last for more than 20 minutes.
Rocks rolling down the slopes of a rumbling volcano, pushing other bigger rocks on their way, and eventually tumbling down into the ocean in a humongous cascade, causing a wave the height of which the world's never seen before. This is what might happen if the Helena slump of the Hawaiian Big Island falls off into the water. The Kilauea volcano is far from dormant. The latest eruption occurred in 2018. Its eruptions are usually accompanied by earthquakes of different magnitudes, and with each quake, the magma rocks on the slopes of the volcano shift down. These rock formations are called slumps, and the Helena slump is the most notorious of them all. In 1868, the shift of this slump caused a tidal wave rising as tall as 60 feet. But what's most troubling is that some 110,000 years ago, a landslide here led to one of the most powerful earthquakes ever, which in turn led to a mega tsunami of over 1,000 feet in height. Scientists are worried that such an event may repeat in the future. If that happens, the wave might engulf the whole of Hawaii and easily reach both North and South American coasts. Geologists are quick to reassure, though, that a landslide like this is unlikely to occur anytime soon. It's just too early for that. But when it finally does, the consequences will be catastrophic. Have a nice day! Yellowstone National Park in the western USA is world famous for its dazzling views, and especially the colorful Grand Prismatic Spring at its very heart. But we should all stay aware that Yellowstone is, first and foremost, an enormous caldera, basically a slumbering supervolcano. The difference between a regular volcano, like Kilauea from earlier, and a supervolcano is that the latter is thousands of times more powerful. Imagine an eruption spewing tons of huge rock and rivers of hot lava, pumping out clouds of ash that make countries stop air travel for weeks. And now multiply all of this by 1,000. This is what a Yellowstone eruption would look like. At first, a huge area in the middle of the national park would shake, crumble, and then blast upwards in a megaton explosion. Lava flows and magma rocks would cover the area of about 40 square miles, roughly half of Washington, D.C. But the greatest danger is the volcanic ash. The ashen plume would rise miles above and get carried by the wind in every direction. Since the eruption would be far from ordinary, the spread and damage would also be much greater than usual. The ash is thick and heavy, so it would cover a vast area in a blanket, destroying crops and even buildings. Worse still, it would spread in the air and block out the sun, leading to a drastic drop in temperature and an artificial winter. Even regular volcanoes can lower temperatures worldwide by a few degrees. A supervolcano may potentially cause a new ice age. Luckily, the chances of Yellowstone supervolcano erupting in the near future, or at all, are extremely low. There have been only 3 of those in the history of Earth, and there's no evidence such a disaster should repeat. Scientists estimate the probability at 0.00014%, which is lower than the chances of an asteroid wiping us all out. Speaking of which, if dinosaurs could talk, and were at least still alive for that matter, they'd tell you that asteroid threat is as real as it gets. Scientists at NASA say they've tracked 90% of all near-Earth asteroids of significant size, and none of them are a matter of any concern. But there are still the other 10% in the great unknown. What's more, asteroids can change their line of flight because of the pull of other celestial bodies and eventually turn our way. Lucky us. Now, if an asteroid big enough, like a mile across, hits the Earth, it will first cause an explosion powerful enough to erase a dozen big cities in a matter of seconds. Then the impact will raise a cloud of dust and debris that will block out the sun, just like the ash cloud from a volcano, and cause a centuries-long winter on the whole planet. But even if it falls into the ocean, which is more likely, a resulting wave will rise several miles high, washing coastal cities off the face of the planet. But at least there won't be a new ice age. Although scientists are pretty sure there's no such threat in the near future, it can't be ruled out completely, and humanity needs at least 5 years to prepare for this event. If a big near-Earth asteroid suddenly changes its course and turns right toward our planet, we won't stand a chance against it. Disaster movie, anyone? A much more probable calamity, though, rests right beneath our feet. It's the San Andreas Fault in California. The fault has been ready for rupture for years now, and scientists estimate that an earthquake along this line is likely to occur in the next 3 decades. And when it happens, it won't be nice. They expect a magnitude of 8.0, which is comparable to some of the most devastating quakes in history. It's all the more dangerous since California is home to some of the most populated cities in the western U.S., including Los Angeles and San Francisco. High-rise buildings are common there, and they're particularly vulnerable against underground shakes. The San Andreas earthquake might cause a whole lot of damage both to cities and countryside. In the worst-case scenario, the ground might break apart, destroying buildings, farms, and changing the landscape altogether. Still, scientists believe that the probability of such a quake is only 7% for the next 30 years. So there's a rather big chance, 93%, that we'll never see that in our lifetime. Yet, there's another earthquake hazard not so far away from the previous one: the megathrust in Chile. The country sits right above the subduction zone, an area where 2 tectonic plates meet and go one beneath the other. At the place of their meeting, stress has accumulated because of their continuous movement, and once that strain is too much, a major earthquake occurs. Chile has experienced a lot of quakes in the recent years, and scientists are worried those might be preparing the area for a really big one. They believe a great earthquake is due to happen before the end of the century, and it might be devastating to the coastal area. Even smaller quakes cause tsunamis that flooded the west coast, and a huge one like that is likely to raise a wave of incredible height. On the bright side, Chile now knows to prepare in advance for the coming natural disasters, and geologists are pretty sure people will be able to evacuate before the earthquake strikes. In September of 1859, Astronomer Richard Carrington was looking at the sun and suddenly saw a bright flare on its surface. He made a note of it in his records, but only realized how important it was a couple of days later. The energy from that flare reached Earth and struck it directly, causing northern lights to appear above Cuba and burning telegraph lines all around the world. This was dubbed the Carrington event, and it was a solar storm. Such storms hit the Earth fairly often, but none of them were so powerful as the Carrington event, neither before nor after. But in 2012, astronomers registered a similar solar flare whose energy nearly hit our planet once again. If it had been just a week earlier, we'd have been in big trouble. Today, humanity relies on electricity in almost every aspect of life, and a powerful solar storm would mess with the electromagnetic field of Earth a lot. All electric appliances would either shut down or short-circuit, and huge transformers powering basically everything would go out of order for good. It would take years to repair them, and the cost of such a massive blackout would count in trillions of dollars. The worst of it is that science is almost unable to predict solar storms, and even if we could know about them in advance, we'd be powerless to stop them. The flare happens in a matter of seconds, and it takes about 8 minutes for the particles to reach the Earth's atmosphere, causing the disturbance. The power outage would come a bit later, in a day or so, when a massive cloud of plasma gets to our planet. At the moment, there's no protection against solar flares, and the chances of one powerful enough to cut all of our electricity in the next few years are quite high, about 12%. The only good thing about all this is that we now know of such a possibility and can at least prepare in advance. Hey, don't forget to pack some underwear and socks. You'll always need those.
On September 16th of 2023, without warning, the Earth began to hum. A low, strange vibration reverberated through the crust. This set off seismic alarms all across the globe. For 9 days straight, the planet was pulsing with this horrifying rhythm, and scientists had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, the total disaster was happening in Greenland. It wasn't an earthquake. They knew that much. They could tell it by the rhythm. Since we all live on giant tectonic plates, they constantly move and slide on magma like icebergs on water. Sometimes as they move, they can rub against each other or collide or break. In any case, all this causes an incredible release of energy that sends shockwaves through the ground. That's when we feel the ground literally shaking, and it's what we call an earthquake. These vibrations we feel are called seismic waves. Seismometers pick them up as pings or rumbles. In a typical earthquake, they create a bunch of different frequencies. It's a crazy chaotic mix of low and high frequencies, like smashing every piano key. What was weird about the Greenland event is that the signals weren't like that at all. It was a steady, single-frequency vibration, as if some ancient machine was stirring beneath the Earth. It's like one piano key being struck over and over, creating a doom-like, repetitive sound. Turns out, what they were hearing wasn't the noise of tectonic plates going wild. It was a phenomenon seismologists had never seen before. The days passed, and the mysterious noise just kept going. The vibrations repeated every 90 seconds, echoing around the world. The hunt for answers was growing more desperate. Seismologists had no idea what they were dealing with. They had to gather a huge international team of 68 people from 15 countries. All these scientists were gathering seismic data, satellite images, and doing some advanced math for several days, until they finally realized who the culprit was. Water. It all happened in a remote, desolate region of East Greenland. This place is full of fjords, narrow inlets of the sea between high cliffs, kinda like deep water-filled valleys surrounded by towering rocky sides. In this area, surrounded by jagged peaks and icy waters, the air was still. The landscape seemingly frozen in time. Nothing here changed much for years. Until one day. A colossal landslide has unfolded in the Dixon Fjord. One of those steep mountainsides towering over the fjord at almost 4,000 feet high collapsed in a massive landslide. Picture a huge chunk of this mountain crumbling and crashing down into the fjord below. This sent a deluge of rock and ice crashing into the water. The impact was just apocalyptic, 882 million cubic feet of debris. That's enough ice and rock to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or 10 Great Pyramids of Giza. And all this nightmare hurled into the water with such force that it kick-started a tsunami about 360 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, into the air. What's crazy is that this incredibly powerful wave was trapped in the fjord by narrow cliffs, unable to escape. It's like water sloshing in a closed bathtub. For 9 days, the mega tsunami continued to churn through it. That's why we heard this endless hum. It was a rhythmic back and forth of the water slamming against the walls. The shock waves were rippling deep into Earth's crust, vibrations so strong that they were picked up by seismometers around the globe. This was a phenomenon so rare, so unprecedented, that it left scientists stunned. It turned out to be a perfect storm of elements. A glacier, weakened by years of warming, could no longer bear the weight of the mountain above. This collapse was inevitable, and the chaos literally shook the Earth to its core. And people often hang out in this area with cruise ships passing by. We're lucky that no lives were lost in the disaster. It was a close call though. A tourist ship stranded in the area just 2 days before narrowly escaped the tsunami's reach by pure luck. But it doesn't mean there were no losses. The waves destroyed a nearby Inuit site, which was there untouched for over 200 years. They also swept away the huts at a research station that were about 43 miles away. The vibrations traveled from Greenland to the South Pole in less than an hour. That just shows how dangerous events like this can be. And this isn't the only place where such catastrophes are happening. In the beautiful California community of Rancho Palos Verdes, the ground is shifting so quickly that it's tearing homes apart. The land there has always been kinda unstable. It has some unique geology. It's built on soft, clay-rich soil and sits on a geological fault line, which makes it prone to landslides. This means that this land is prone to slow, natural shifting over many years, even when no crazy weather is happening. It's been like this for decades, but usually it's slow and pretty manageable, like about a foot a year. Imagine a tree that you played with as a kid moving 20 feet to the left as you grow up. For decades, residents adapted. They built their homes on adjustable beams. This helped the houses to move with the land, and that strategy worked well until now. Recently, things have been getting much worse in the community. Now, the land is moving by a foot in a single week. That would be like if the same tree moved almost 960 feet since you were a child. The past 2 years have also caused some heavy rains, and the weather has been getting worse. This increased water content in the soil. The land became heavier and more prone to rapid movement. Now, this once idyllic seaside escape turned into a disaster zone. Cracks have appeared in closets, gardens, and roads, growing larger with each passing day. Streets that were once smooth are now buckled and twisted, with roads turning into a crazy theme park. Houses that once stood firm are being ripped from their foundations, some of them split in half. One of the houses had its front door 8 feet off the ground. Entire neighborhoods have been plunged into chaos. Utility companies had to switch off gas and electricity indefinitely to prevent potential disasters. The hardest hit is the coastal neighborhood of Portuguese Bend, where residents are living on the edge. Literally. It always had amazing ocean views and cool sea breezes, with horses and peacocks still wandering the tree-lined streets. But now, it's like an earthquake hit. Only this time, the earth isn't stopping. For many, this place feels like paradise, if only the land would stop shifting beneath their feet. So the locals don't give up. Some of them had to leave, but many are determined to stay and fight, despite the destruction. but they still have to pour in hundreds of thousands of dollars to save their properties. People have installed generators to keep the lights on and set up sewer systems and pumps to drain the groundwater causing the landslides. Some say that the only way for these neighborhoods to survive might be to go completely off-grid, installing power walls to store energy and stuff like that. People are trying their best to run the sewer system off generators. They hope that they could get rid of this water in the soil that's causing these hellish landslides in the first place. They're determined to fight, but they will need help and support from the government to fight this disaster. Landslides are actually more common across the US than many might think. And new maps and data show that tons of people in the country might be in danger. Scientists managed to create the first very detailed, very cool map that shows where these landslides might happen, county by county. It's based on a lot of data and the history of 1 million previous landslides. They say that nearly 40% of the United States is at risk of experiencing landslide activity, which could lead to some insane catastrophes in certain areas. Luckily, now both residents and engineers can keep this in mind. But all this shows how vulnerable we are to natural disasters and how we should always stay alerted.
The sea, this unrelenting water beast, has been defying all attempts to tame it for centuries. Many ships driven by the wind have gone through the harshest parts of the world. Some have survived the struggle with the sea, and many have come off second best. It's the year 1834. A ship called the Pilgrim is setting a course to sail from California to Boston. The journey will venture around South America and then past Cape Horn of Chile. Richard signs up as a merchant seaman aboard the Pilgrim. This is his first voyage at sea. The crew tells Richard stories of the Drake Passage off Cape Horn, a route that's legendary for its dangers. Countless ships and sailors have disappeared in those waters. Since Cape Horn's discovery in 1526, it's quickly become known to all those that have sailed around it as the ultimate test of any mariner's skill and of any ship's strength. Those that have survived the journey call Cape Horn a sailor's nightmare. Jack the helmsman, a salty veteran, steers the ship towards this most dangerous of all routes. Jack has been aboard the Pilgrim since it was first commissioned in 1825. He's passed by the Horn many times, each time learning a different lesson from the tests provided by the sea. The Pilgrim has been refitted since its past voyage a year ago. Richard values Jack's experience, given that it's his first journey at sea. Jack assures Richard of his confidence in the Pilgrim, even though it's just a small wooden brig with 2 masts. Jack's aware that wooden vessels are gradually becoming outdated, replaced by new steam-powered ships. But Jack prefers the maneuverability of the Pilgrim and would take it over the steel ships any day. Richard is excited to be aboard. There's so much to explore in life as a merchant seaman, but the guy struggles to acquire his sea legs on the boat. Forceful winds make the Pilgrim move faster, providing Richard with a quick introduction to life at sea. At the same time, nothing can prepare him for what is to be experienced at Cape Horn. It's the southernmost point of land before Antarctica. The gap between the icy continent and Cape Horn holds the infamous Drake Passage, approximately 700 miles between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. Strong winds provide an uninterrupted, steadfast journey toward the Horn. But, as Jack tells Richard, the winds are more concentrated at the Drake Passage. They create a funneling effect, becoming stronger and more unpredictable. Richard is unsure of what this might mean for the Pilgrim, but understands that there's no easier route to travel around South America. A few days pass. The Pilgrim sails by the many islands that make up the western coast of Chile. Although the sea has been relatively calm, Richard continues to deal with his lack of sea legs. His movements are still not very graceful. The constant, ever-swaying deck rises and falls, and Richard finds it hard to get used to the motion. Random large waves hit the Pilgrim from every angle. The ship is quickly approaching Cape Horn. Richard looks towards great thunderous black clouds in the distance. "Welcome to the Horn," Jack says. half laughing. A wry smile upon his face soon disappears. The man gets serious, knowing what awaits them all. Stronger winds start blowing the sails as the crew scrambles to hang onto the ropes. Richard desperately sets to adjust the aft sails, adjusting for the constant change in strong southerly winds. Jack holds firm at the helm, knowing the importance of his role. He's wary of the swell. It can build very quickly the further south they travel. It's crucial the Pilgrim doesn't venture too close to the Horn when they approach. The great darkness that was in the distance is now all around them, filling the sky in every direction. Blackened clouds throw rain and hail down at the crew as they try to resist the enraged weather. Jack is directed by the captain at the helm, changing the direction of the vessel. The temperature has dropped significantly. Barely keeping the water from his eyes, he turns toward the port side bow to provide his face a brief break from the torment of the wind. Looking out into the distance, the man sees the Horn standing alone, surrounded by mist. It's a haunting sight. He steers the Pilgrim along the face of the Horn, the distance getting shorter. The waves shrink in height since the depths become shallower, but these waves are much steeper and their angle can cause more damage to the wooden vessel. Jack's unsure how much of these waves the Pilgrim can take before the hull is breached. Richard, still posted at the aft sails, watches the water and icebergs floating by. He's unsure how large they actually are, since they're mostly hidden underwater. But he knows to alert Jack if any get too close. Just one iceberg hitting the Pilgrim will be all that the hull can withstand. Dutifully, he watches over the side and into the distance. Icebergs aren't the only thing to look out for. Rogue waves are common in these seas as well. The connecting Antarctic and Pacific Oceans, mixed with stormy weather, form waves together. This creates much larger rogue waves. Such waves have been known to reach up to 100 feet tall. They can destroy most vessels in their path. It'll surely be the end of the Pilgrim if it comes across a rogue wave. Strong currents adjust the route of the Pilgrim, as though the Horn is trying to lure the ship toward its rocky shallows. Slowly, they are getting pulled closer toward the Horn. Jack is fighting the current at the helm. Spinning the wheel, he strains his body as much as he can. Grunting, he plunges the wheel from the port side to starboard and back again. The captain keeps yelling directions. To a novice, they're extremely confusing. But Jack, a hardened veteran, continues to interpret the directions with ease, steering to readjust their course away from the Horn. The captain orders Richard to assess the hull below the decks. With the level of pounding the Drake Passage has provided so far, it's surely harmed the ship in some way. Richard runs to the deck as another sailor yells something at him, but the noise of the sea makes it difficult to hear. A wave hits the side, flowing onto the deck. Richard manages to hang on to the mast before he's almost swept overboard. The entire front deck seems to be underwater. Hanging on as the water rolls off the sides of the ship and waiting for it to clear, Richard watches the Horn slowly go past. Still, it beckons toward the Pilgrim, as though asking for its dues from the crew. The currents are still pulling the ship, while the storm is raging on, with no end of the struggle in sight. The storm is growing ever larger and fiercer. Richard gathers himself to head below and assess the damage. After a slow descent to the lower decks, Richard can finally look over the hull from the ship's quarters. There's no damage from what he can gather. But he's shocked by the depth of the water inside. It's now at waist depth. Cups, amongst other things, float in the water. Even inside the ship, the guy can't escape the waves. Unable to make sense of it all, he stands frozen, listening to the almighty power of Mother Nature outside. The sea roars even more wildly, waves constantly thudding against the hull. It sounds like a somber drumbeat, a slow countdown to the demise of the Pilgrim. Richard forces himself back to the terrors of the above decks, grasping onto the rails to carefully walk the slippery stairs. He leaves the disturbing creaks of the wooden decks. They're soon replaced with the strained sounds of the ropes, the yells of other sailors, and the deafening roar of the sea crashing all around him. Jack is at the helm, focused on his role, still fighting the wind and the waves, even with the addition of ice and frost. It seems that the world around him has set its heart to distract the man from his duty, but Jack pushes on determinedly. For 9 days, the Pilgrim fights the constant changes in stormy weather, facing all kinds of obstacles, but the ship manages to make it through. As they leave the storm behind, the crew sets their course north for their final destination. The sight of the sun peeking through the dark clouds is the most relieving thing Richard has ever experienced. Unfortunately, Richard lost his rations at some stage during the storm. At sea, if your rations are lost, it's your own bad luck. Luckily, Jack is kind enough to share some of his.
Back in the day, from 774 to 775, Earth got hit with a mega blast of radiation. This crazy burst of energy left its mark. 3 rings from that year show way too high levels of radioactive stuff. But what exactly caused it? Scientists are inclined to think that the reason was a solar flare. Some folks think maybe a massive supernova caused the radiation blast. But astronomer Phil Plait says that if that had been the case, it would have had to be less than 1,000 light years away and would have had been crazy bright. But there's no record of that happening. No bright, shiny Death Star in sight. After looking at the radioactive carbon and beryllium in tree rings, scientists ruled out a bunch of other possibilities. At first, they considered that it was a smash-up between neutron stars or a neutron star and a black hole. These types of crashes produce a super quick blast of gamma rays without any light show, which lines up best with the evidence. But these kinds of collisions are super rare. Plait thinks it's kinda unlikely that this is the answer. He figures we should only see one of these events in our galaxy about once every million years. So having one just 1,200 years ago seems pretty wild. Scientists are seriously worried about these rare events. If one happened closer to Earth, it could seriously mess up life on our planet. Even if it was thousands of light years away, a similar event today could cause chaos with all the fancy electronic systems we've come to rely on. So it's a good thing those gamma ray bursts are so rare, because if they were more common, Earth might be in for a rough ride. You may think that if our planet could withstand mega radiation blasts, it can easily withstand something less frightening. Let's say grasshoppers. Sorry to say that, but it's not exactly true. Back in 1874, during a hot summer in Kansas, things took a strange turn. Grasshoppers, or should I say locusts, invaded the Great Plains like nobody's business. They came down like a storm, blanketing houses, trees, and even poor trains passing by. These bugs were on a mission to cause chaos. Farmers had to scramble to protect their wells and just about anything else worth saving. Locusts landed everywhere, wreaking havoc on everything in sight. Even poor sheep lost their wool. Locusts even stripped paint off wagons and handles off pitchforks. This is how destructive they were. Livestock tried to fight back by eating them, but there were just too many of these insects. That year, those critters caused about $200 million in crop damage. The locust invasion was so tough, even the US Army stepped in to help. In the end, locusts began to disappear, sparing the plains from further devastation. Natural disasters can be even more unexpected than radiation blasts from space and locust invasions. Check this out. Back in June 2017, a reindeer herder up in northwest Siberia was minding their own business when they suddenly heard a crazy loud blast and saw smoke shooting up from the ground. If that happened to me, I'd need to change my pants. Sorry. Later on, they found this huge hole that was like 23 feet wide and nearly 65 feet deep and was surrounded by chunks of ice and dirt. It turned out that there were over 17 such black holes in the area. They were filled with peaty water and shrouded in mystery. Some folks thought those were sinkholes. Others were sure they were left by top-secret device tests or even a bunch of meteorites. Now, the latest idea is that these holes are actually craters caused by the Arctic warming up and melting the frozen ground. The theory states that as the ground thaws, gas pockets trapped beneath the surface burst through, creating such dramatic holes. Apparently, these eerie craters have been showing up in specific spots in Siberia where ancient geological faults have been leaking out hot natural gas for ages. Combine that with some leftover methane from old lake sediments, and you've got a recipe for some explosive surprises as the planet heats up. Not scared yet? Alright, maybe you're afraid of darkness, huh? If so, you wouldn't like it back in 536. It's the year when the world went through a crazy 18-month period of darkness. A mysterious fog covered Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, blocking out the sun and causing chaos. It was like the Dark Ages, but for real. It turns out that the main culprit behind this fog was a volcanic eruption in Iceland. This eruption spread ash across the northern hemisphere, causing temperatures to drop and crops to fail. People were freezing and starving. It was a mess. Historians from back in the day even talked about how weird it was. The sun looked like the moon, summers were freezing cold, and even China had summer snow. It was all because of the volcanic ash blocking out the sun. And to make things even worse, this period of darkness sparked the beginning of the bubonic plague in 541. Talk about a rough time to be alive. Let's go back to Siberia real quick. Back in 1908, way out in the wilds of Siberia, an asteroid dropped for an unexpected visit. Today, we know it as the Tunguska asteroid, but it didn't get its name instantly. Local folks only caught a glimpse of the show. A bright fireball streaking across the sky, followed by a massive boom. Trees went flying, fires blazed, and animals weren't too happy about it either. But since the area was so remote, not many folks took notice. For almost 2 decades, nobody bothered to check out the Tunguska site. People had too much on their plates back then. But then, scientists finally made it out there and found evidence of the asteroid's shenanigans. Later in expeditions, they found some spacey microparticles. Fast forward to now, and NASA has a whole planetary defense thing going on. They even sent a mission to test out asteroid deflecting tech. Because who knows when the next cosmic rock will come knocking on our door, right? In the middle of the 19th century, there was one more epic solar storm called the Carrington event. It may not sound like a big deal to you, but it had pretty rough consequences. The next day after the storm, Earth was hit with this insane geomagnetic storm that threw telegraphs off the rails and brought auroras to the tropics. And it's the place where they normally never show up. Turns out, all this space weather madness started with weird stuff happening on the sun's surface, like sunspots. From these spots, solar flares and other crazy electromagnetic stuff can pop out and mess with our technology. Massive solar storms like this one can shoot out from the sun at speeds of up to 1,800 miles per second. They can contain billions of tons of solar material, complete with a sassy little magnetic field that loves to mess with Earth's magnetic field when they meet. Now, listen closely. We're getting close to the next solar maximum in 2025, so it's a good time to check out the history of the worst solar storms, like the Carrington event, and take notice. Imagine if a similar storm hit today. An internet apocalypse, anyone? Businesses would be sent offline and we'd be facing some serious damages. Luckily, these mega solar storms don't happen very often. But hey, space weather is tricky to predict, so who knows when the next one will hit?
You look out the window and see the trees moving uncontrollably. The winds are so powerful, they're practically tearing down anything in the street. There are also tons of water raining down on you. You're driving as fast as you can, but suddenly your car stops. You've heard the terms typhoon, cyclone, and hurricane, but you most likely don't know how they're different. The official scientific term for all 3 of them is a tropical storm. While they're practically the same thing, and they form the same way, they're different depending on where they occur. Hurricanes are the ones that form over the Atlantic Ocean or the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Tropical cyclones act as giant engine turbines powered by warm, moist air and form only over warm bodies of ocean water near the equator. The warm and moist air surrounding the ocean rises and leaves low-pressure air close to the surface. In turn, the air below becomes moist and warm and also rises. The cycle goes on, with warm air pushing up and squeezing the low pressure near the surface, only to rise as warm, moist air. When the warm, moist air cools off, it forms clouds. These clouds create the tropical storms we all fear. The storms spin the same way as the Earth is rotating. So, storms to the south of the equator rotate clockwise, and storms north of the equator spin counterclockwise. The eye of the storm happens when the storm spins so fast that it actually becomes visibly clear in the center with low air pressure. But you'd have to look at it from above, which is super risky. Tropical storms normally move at around 39 miles per hour. Tropical cyclones are way faster, around 74 miles per hour. They're also known as hurricanes. If you're standing at the tip of the North or South Pole, the Earth's rotation will appear to stand still, even though the rest of the Earth is experiencing day and night like everyone else. In the poles, you have really long nights and days that last for months. Over at the equator, time moves along with the distance around the planet, which is around 25,000 miles long. The Coriolis effect makes wind patterns traveling long distances around Earth appear to move in a curve rather than a straight line. And because of the planet's unique shape, the speeds are different. It affects the Coriolis force and hurricanes as well. Because there's no curving of the object's path as measured relative to Earth's surface at the equator, the Coriolis force equals 0. A hurricane starter pack includes deep, warm ocean water. It all happens in the moist middle layers of the atmosphere, with a chilly atmosphere on top. It also takes some low wind and some surface disturbance. And it can stretch around 300 miles away from a large body of water where the center of a large hurricane is. The good thing is that hurricanes get weaker when they hit the land, because the warm water in the middle of the ocean isn't giving it the juice it needs to stay pumped. But it'll still carry a sustainable amount of damage with the strong winds and rain. In 1900, one of the biggest hurricanes struck near Central America and in the Gulf of Mexico. It then went as far as Florida and Texas, and is considered to be the most devastating hurricane in the United States' history. They first detected it on August 27th, and it lasted for many days. By the time it reached the Texas coast, the storm had turned into a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricanes are categorized on wind speed and intensity, using something called a Saffir-Simpson scale. There are 5 different categories from 1 to 5, with 1 being the weakest and 5 being the strongest. A Category 1 storm has winds moving at between 74 to 95 miles per hour. You can expect some trees to be uprooted and mobile homes destroyed. It can take out some home exterior and cause major power outages. Category 5 hurricanes speed up to over 155 miles per hour and leave nothing in their path. They can even wipe out some buildings right off their foundation. And because the winds are faster, there is more damage around its radius. Another thing to expect is lots and lots of flooding. The people of Galveston had less than 4 days to prepare for the arriving storm that even stretched out to Oklahoma and Kansas with 20-foot flash floods. The Great Hurricane then made its way to the Great Plains and turned towards the Great Lakes, New England, and reached southeastern Canada. The storm was so bad that more than 3,600 homes were damaged, even though they were sturdy enough to withstand the storm. Given the population numbers back then, it was equivalent to hundreds of thousands of houses destroyed, if not millions. The total property damage was around $30 million then, which would be a lot more now because of inflation. After the devastating storm, the people of Galveston built a 3.5-mile seawall and raised the whole city level by as much as 16 feet. Eventually, they raised the seawalls to 10 miles, just in case. If a storm like the one in Galveston struck in modern times, there wouldn't be enough places for everyone to hide. The population has increased significantly all over the areas where the storm struck back in 1900. So, Imagine yourself sitting in your car and getting the breaking news. It says a storm has just hit the Gulf of Mexico and east of it near Cuba. No biggie, since you're all the way in Texas. So you drive back home. There's plenty of people at gas stations and in supermarkets. The news now states that the storm will likely gain momentum and strike right where you live. Okay, now it's time to panic. You want to get some stuff to prepare for the incoming storm, but all the shelves are empty by now. Everyone is pushing and shoving like at a rock concert. You grab whatever you can find and make your way back to your car. You're lucky enough to purchase some extra gallons of gasoline, just in case. You drive from supermarket to supermarket to try and get some stuff, but you're out of luck. Finally, you find a place that still has some essentials. You start stocking up your shopping cart when the local news urges everyone to evacuate. You only have a matter of hours to leave. But you left your dog at home! You rush against the traffic to get there. Your entire neighborhood is completely empty. You fetch your precious pooch and grab some important things before leaving. There's just a little time left, and you can already start to feel the winds picking up and the ocean nearby. The news tells you the hurricane has already struck Florida. You get in the car, but it won't start. Since you were driving so fast, you didn't realize that you emptied your gas. Good thing you got those extra gas cans on the way. With half a tank, you can get out of your city and into a safe place where everyone is going. The winds are getting stronger. There's no way you're going to outrun this storm. There's no one in sight since they all left early. It starts raining heavily. You can see some trees swaying like crazy. Finally, you find something that looks like a large shelter. You reach it to find out that it's just an abandoned mall. And then, the worst happens. You realize you've been going in the wrong direction all this time. You get out of the car for a bit to stretch out and see which road to take. The winds are so strong that you go back to the car only to find out that your dog ran off. You can't find her anywhere. You drive around and call out her name, but she doesn't respond. You see her standing behind some bushes barking. You run down to her and discover that she has found a cool underground abandoned shelter. The winds have now reached a dangerous point where you can't drive anymore. You gather your stuff and head down. It's complete with everything and even has a bed. You can hear the winds and rain above you, but you're snuggled up with your dog. The next day, you get up and see that your car has been tossed over to another road, and there's not a single tree in sight. But hey, you can at least be happy you survived one of the strongest storms in the world.
The surface of this river looks as if it's covered with fish scales. Is it a giant water dragon or some other ancient monster? Not really. The explanation is much more boring, but surprising at the same time. Now let's start from the very beginning. This is the Shantung River in China, and this is Hangzhou Bay, its estuary, which is the tidal mouth of a river, where the tide meets the stream itself. Now this area is home to the world's largest tidal bores. A tidal bore is a strong tide that pushes up the river against the current. In the Shantung River, such tidal bores can reach a whopping 29 feet. The area regularly sees trains of large waves moving upstream. But in 2021, during a scientific expedition, experts discovered a marvelous natural phenomenon unique to this area. Sometimes, the tide comes in swirling waves. That's the famous fish scale tide. Thing is, this region has rotating currents, which means that the tide doesn't just move inland and then simply reverses its direction. Instead, a rotating current easily changes direction without changing its speed. This makes the Shantung River perfect for winding up with groups of waves crashing into one another at oblique angles, which is like a cross sea. Let's speak about this phenomenon now. These four-sided wave patterns in the ocean look mesmerizing, as if the ocean deities decided to play a round of giant chess. But what you observe is the phenomenon known as square waves. They're often called cross-sea and grid waves too. The thing is, most waves reach the shore and break parallel to the coastline. But in some regions of the world, these waves create a chessboard-like pattern on the surface of the water. When you look at these waves from above, you might think there's an underwater grid forming square-shaped ripples. But square waves aren't caused by anything taking place beneath the surface of the water. They're the result of the way the water moves. Weather patterns in certain regions make waves form at different angles. When two opposing swells crash, we've got this unique pattern on our hands. However beautiful and unusual this natural phenomenon is, it's also extremely dangerous. If you spot square waves while swimming, get out of the water immediately. Square waves usually come hand in hand with rip currents, incredibly strong currents flowing seaward from the shore. Plus, square waves can reach 10 feet in height, and that's not something even an experienced swimmer can deal with. So, we're done with the seas for the moment and are moving to the largest active volcano in Europe. It's Etna, and it continues to amaze us with jaw-dropping smoke ring shows. But wait, people live there. Isn't it time to evacuate them? The volcano looks like it's about to go off. Well, let's calm down. There's no need to fuss. Experts assure us that the production of such rings doesn't mean that a big eruption is on the way. These white smoke rings are made of water vapor and are generated by bursts of gas bubbles inside a narrow duct over a magma chamber. Etna was even nicknamed the Lady of the Ring, and currently the volcano is breaking its own records. For example, in the year 2000, the volcano produced around 5,000 such smoke rings. According to researchers, no other volcano on Earth produces as many volcanic vortex rings as Etna. Southeast Crater is especially active. It emits countless beautiful vapor rings. Now, don't look away from the sky. You might witness something like what the residents of New Jersey saw recently. A massive fireball lit up the sky in the Garden State and surrounding areas. A meteor falling to the ground looked like a bright streak of light, and the folks of several New Jersey towns, as well as some parts of New York, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, reported this show to the American Meteor Society. Security camera footage posted online by some witnesses of this awesome phenomenon showed the flash dash across the sky within a couple of seconds at 3:43 a.m. Another unbelievable phenomenon captured recently is one of the rarest in the world and almost impossible to see with the unaided eye. A West Australian photographer was shooting a wet season thunderstorm just outside of Derby when he managed to film on camera a few red sprites. He said later that they were gone in the blink of an eye. He described red sprites as huge, feathery tendrils of purple and red and specks of bright red. Red sprites are massive electrical discharges that take different shapes and look like reddish-orange flashes. They last for just fractions of a second and occur after super strong lightning strokes. Even though they're usually caused by the lightning discharges between a thundercloud and the ground, sprites soar up into the air, up to 60 miles. Interestingly, this phenomenon had been dismissed and considered to be fiction for decades, until scientists finally caught it on film. Since that time, red sprites have been recorded regularly. Catatumbo lightning is the world's longest lightning storm. The heart of the storm, which repeats every year, is over the mouth of the Catatumbo River, where it empties into Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela. This storm towers higher than a regular one. Catatumbo lightning occurs for 140 to 160 nights a year, lasts for 9 hours a day, and produces 16 to 40 lightning flashes per minute. Maybe you've heard of how they say lightning doesn't strike the same place twice? Well, Catatumbo doesn't seem to know about this rule. Or at least, it doesn't prevent storm clouds from gathering in the very same place year after year. A fellow hill walking in the UK has captured amazing shots of a weather phenomenon that was called an angel in the sky. So look at it. This scene was captured with a Canon 5D Mark IV camera. The silhouette, though, isn't some non-material thing. It's just the shadow of the photographer at the center of a circular rainbow. Mesmerized, the photographer took a few more photos and continued walking. Such an effect is produced when an observer stands above the upper surface of a cloud. It can also be a mountain or some other high ground, and the sun should be shining from behind their back. When the observer sees their shadow, the light is reflected in such a way that a bizarre circular glory appears around the point directly opposite the sun. Another cool sky phenomenon was witnessed in Auckland. Look at this. What does it remind you of? I bet you think it looks like a spaceship from a different civilization, but it's just a rare meteorological phenomenon. Everyone who saw the circular cloud formation said it looked like a hole in the cloud cover, and some also added that a small rainbow was visible inside. This phenomenon is known as a fall streak hole and a punch hole cloud. Such a formation is quite rare. Even experts have seen it just a few times throughout their careers. What happens here is some sort of atmospheric disturbance within supercooled water, the disturbance being an airplane or something similar. As a result, the supercooled water rapidly turns into ice crystals. Since the crystals are heavier than the surrounding cloud, they fall out, leaving a hole behind. The process happens high up in the atmosphere and is quick. It takes only minutes or so. Well, let's get back to the ground and examine the phenomenon people in the US can witness. It's an extremely rare one. Nothing similar has happened like this since 1803. What is it? Billions of cicadas from two different broods are merging together from the underground after more than 200 years. All these loud singing insects belong to two distinct families of periodical cicadas. One group emerges to the surface every 13 years, and the other every 17 years. It's a rare occurrence when the cycles of both groups align. This year, this once-in-a-lifetime event is taking place since two groups with different cycles are emerging at the same time. These broods are known as Brood 13 and Brood 19. They have been seen and heard across the southern U.S. and as far north as Illinois. Well, we've been miscalling Uranus all this time. Actually, astronomers say we should be pronouncing it like Uranus, not Uranus. I can't say a different stress changes much, though. However, things could have been different. Initially, Uranus was supposed to have the majestic king-like name of George, because astronomers wanted to name it after King George III. In the end, they changed their minds, and now, well, it's the punchline of every joke. If you take the total cost of launching a mission and divide it by the weight of the cargo, you'll see some pretty mind-blowing figures. According to specialists, back in 2016, it used to cost $10,000 to send just 1 pound of cargo into space. But now, prices have gone through the roof. Cygnus spacecraft's cargo costs over $43,000 per pound, while SpaceX's new carriers come in at around $27,000 per pound. Remember how hard it is to pay $5 for water at airports? Now, a bottle of water in space would cost somewhere between $9,000 and $43,000, and that's only to have it delivered in space. Now, as for water in space, well, it used to be considered a super rare thing. But in reality, there's water ice all over our solar system, so you don't have to buy those overpriced $43K water bottles. It's hanging out there in comets, asteroids, and even in hard-to-see craters on Mercury and the Moon. We're not sure if there's enough water in these places to support colonies of people, though. Mars also has ice at its poles, hiding under the surface dust and frost. Even smaller celestial bodies, like Saturn's moon Enceladus and dwarf planet Ceres, have ice. NASA scientists think there might be a chance of finding life on Jupiter's moon Europa. There might be liquid water beneath its icy shell. Europa, even though it's a lot smaller than Earth, might have an ocean deep enough to hold twice as much water as all the oceans on our planet combined. In 2009, scientists exploring a massive cloud of dust and gas in the center of our galaxy stumbled upon a fascinating surprise. They found ethyl formate within the cloud. This chemical is responsible for the delightful flavor of raspberries and has a rum-like scent. Furthermore, another nearby region is brimming with ethyl alcohol, the same type found in many beverages. In fact, there is enough alcohol in this region to provide every person on Earth with 300,000 pints of beer every day for the next billion years. Now, believe it or not, we do have a black hole on Earth. The thing is, creating an in-lab black hole was a sort of indispensable thing to do. Studying black holes in real space remains a distant dream, so it was only possible to create one to experiment with in a lab. A group of scientists in the Netherlands wanted to explore the mysterious Hawking radiation theory proposed by the iconic Stephen Hawking. Using atoms to mimic an event horizon, they orchestrated electrons, causing a surge in temperature that resembled flat spacetime. As particles moved through quantum fluctuations, a ring of infrared radiation appeared around the lab-grown black hole, mirroring Hawking's idea. So, if you totally understood what I just said, could you please explain it to me? Now, it may sound insane, but you can totally be allergic to the moon. Long story short, it was the final Apollo mission, and they brought back more rock samples than ever before. Plus, they had the first and only pro-scientist on the moon, Jack Schmitt. He was a geologist, and his rock samples helped scientists learn more about the moon's magnetic field and volcanic history. During the expeditions, it became evident that Jack Schmitt was allergic to moon dust. The gritty, sticky powder clung to his suit and his skin, causing irritation in his sinuses, nose, eyes, and throat for a couple of hours after he took his helmet off. Meanwhile, neutron stars are extremely dense, being basically just a bunch of neutrons squished into a super small space. If you had just a teaspoonful of this stuff, it would weigh more than the entire human population combined. And to match the density of a neutron star, we'd all have to squeeze into the space the size of a sugar cube. No thanks. When it comes to outer space, we tend to think that Earth and the Moon are pretty close together. But in reality, you can actually squeeze all the other planets of our solar system between Earth and the Moon. The average distance between them is about 240,000 miles. If you added up the diameters of the 7 planets, you'd still have some room to spare, about 5,000 miles. In 2011, scientists made a groundbreaking discovery of a massive reservoir of water in space. This water, equivalent to 140 trillion times all the water in Earth's oceans, could provide each person on our planet with a planet's worth of water 20,000 times over. This reservoir was located near a massive black hole drawing in matter and emitting energy, known as a quasar. The water was formed by energy waves colliding hydrogen and oxygen atoms together, and it was found around 12 billion light-years away. So, when the Curiosity Mars rover snapped its very first sunset picture in 2015, scientists were practically doing backflips from excitement. Turns out, sunsets on the red planet are anything but red. They're actually a stunning shade of blue. According to NASA, the reason behind this phenomenon is that the dust in Mars' atmosphere is like a magical filter that lets blue light shine through while blocking out those warm tones like yellow, orange, and red. Well, Venus is a slow spinner compared to Earth. It takes this planet 243 days to make a full rotation, and it spins in the opposite direction. But even though Venus takes longer to spin around, it zooms around the Sun in just 225 days because it's located so close. So, believe it or not, a year on Venus is actually shorter than its day. So, you might think that the night sky should be full of stars with no dark spaces at all. This idea is known as Olbers' paradox, named after German astronomer Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers. He thought that if the universe was infinite, unchanging, and timeless, then we should see stars everywhere we look. But it turns out that the universe is not infinite, unchanging, or timeless. Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is actually expanding, and the leftover radiation from the Big Bang tells us that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old. Think of all the birthday candles. Ooh! So, the reason we don't see stars in every direction is because some stars are just too far away, or they haven't been around long enough for their light to travel all the way to us. During the Apollo 16 lunar mission, Ken Mattingly, the command module pilot, had a bit of a scare when he realized his wedding ring was missing. The whole crew frantically searched the spacecraft for it, but no luck. Finally, on day 9, while Mattingly was on a spacewalk, the ring was spotted floating out the hatch door. Charles Duke Jr. tried to grab it but missed. Luckily, it bounced off Mattingly's helmet into Duke's hands. It's cool they found the ring, but there are many other things people left up there. There's even a toothbrush floating around somewhere. Mercury is already the tiniest planet in our solar system, not counting Pluto, of course, and the second densest after Earth. And believe it or not, it's actually shrinking and getting denser. For a long time, scientists thought Earth was the only planet with tectonic activity. But that all changed when the Messenger spacecraft flew by Mercury, giving us a detailed scan of the whole planet. In 2016, Messenger discovered these cool cliff-like formations called fault scarps. Since they're still relatively small, scientists think they're pretty new, suggesting that Mercury is still contracting 4.5 billion years after the solar system began. And around 10 years ago, Australian astronaut Luca Parmitano went through a near-drowning experience during his spacewalk due to a water leak that went unaddressed. Nobody knew how it happened and why Luca ended up having water in his helmet. NASA was investigating the issue for months, but they were unable to determine the exact cause of the water entering Luca's helmet.